Okay, good morning. We'll call this morning's meeting to order. First thing, announce Jenny will not be here with us today. She's got a sick child, so we'll move on without her there. First thing we got is the approval of the agenda.
Mr. Chair, before we approve the agenda, I'd like to ask for an agenda addition, and that is to give a report on last night's Buffalo Red River Watershed District meeting.
Okay. Is that one addition? Any other additions?
I'll move to approve with the addition.
Okay, we got a motion and a second. To approve the agenda with an addition. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Citizens to be heard. Is anybody out there wants to be heard that's for something that's not on the agenda? Okay. Approval of the minutes from the February 25th meeting.
Move approval.
Second.
Got a motion by Jim, second by Grant to approve the minutes from February 25th. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Motion passes. Approval of the bills.
Move to approve.
Second. Got a motion by Kevin, second by Jim to approve the bills. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay. Bills pass. With that, we'll move on to Gabe. Are you taking the next one? We have the annual, oh no, we have the annual department update. Yeah. Sheriff Empting, Julie Savat, and Gabe. That's one of the good chairs.
Let him do that. Morning, thanks for having us today.
He's got the gun, he can do what he wants.
No, we don't give him any bullets.
You gotta have fun. Okay, go ahead.
All right, well, 2019 started off to be a rather busy year for us. In January, obviously, I had taken office, and we started off training 3 new deputies right away because we needed to get some replacements due to retirements and then my position as well. We also had to get some lieutenants in place as far as patrol lieutenant, and Lieutenant Green had retired, so we needed a new emergency manager who Gabe Tweeten is now in that position. He does a fantastic job there. 2019 was also an extremely busy time as far as trying to get the jail get going and finished and things like that, and you're going to hear from these two about that. I'm going to kind of hit some highlights of the other divisions that we do have. Our investigations divisions continue to stay busy throughout the year of 2019 by continuing to work on the Hitterdall homicide that occurred in 2018. They had to continue with follow-up on that, and they were able to work that, and they got 2 successful convictions on that recently, so it's very good to get that case settled and put away. We did move Deputy Jeff Bakken into a narcotics investigator position as well in April, and now him and Detective Burkle are both working narcotics investigations in the area, and both of them are staying extremely busy with narcotics investigations. We've seen an uptick in those, and they're staying very busy with that. Detective Diekman, he is also staying in the street crimes unit, but we also put him on the U.S. Marshals Task Force, and they're very busy in their positions as well. He is continuing to do a great job in his position as a street crimes operator. Our support services division, to say the least, they have been extremely busy throughout the year. We thought we'd see some transport numbers decline. The transport numbers had not declined. The transport deputies logged 93,080 miles in 2019, and they transported 796 people. A lot of those are being MI type people as well, and also going to other counties and picking up warrants and things like that. Our civil division, they have also been rather busy. They served 24,087 papers throughout the course of 2019, and a lot of those were writs and evictions and affidavits and subpoenas and things of that nature, so they have also been staying very busy. The 2019 also brought a new magistrate into the courthouse, so we had to, we're seeing some additional courthouse staffing challenges downstairs with our court security deputies, but they seem to be handling those very, very well with that additional magistrate down there. You're going to get the emergency management and corrections update here soon. Our records division, they continue to keep the department running essentially. They are the backbone of the department, to say the least. They are making sure that reports are being done in a timely manner. This is getting to be a little bit more difficult as there's been more demands on them, and making sure that the reports are coming over the courts in time. There's also an increase in our patrol division as far as reports they're putting through, so that obviously is a little bit more on our record staff as well. Like I indicated before, the patrol division, we started off with 3 new deputies in the training program. They've all completed their training program. They're on their own. We have seen a dramatic increase in calls for service between 17 and 18, there was a big jump. 18 and 19, there's a bigger jump. And we're on pace to probably be even a larger jump for 2020. And I have some graphs here if you'd like to review them. As you can see, the graphs I'm centering around, they are for 2020. And the blue line is going to be 2018, the red line is 2019, and the green line is going to be 2020. And you can see that there's a big jump in our calls for service already for 2020. I do have the comparison numbers as well for 2016 to 2019, and 16, 17 were roughly 11,200, 300. We stayed pretty consistent between those 2 years, but 2018 we saw a big jump. We jumped up to about 13,725. In 2019 we were at 15,933. So this is definitely.
So Sheriff, can I ask a question on this, Mr.? These calls for service, are these calls specific for county service, or does this incorporate some assisting of Dilworth or Moorhead? Or
Yep.
It includes those?
Those are all of our calls for service for Clay County, to include the
Okay.
assists, to include our
Okay,
civil
okay.
papers that we serve,
Okay.
things of that nature. So
Okay.
they're all calls that the sheriff's office have been taking.
Very good, thank you.
Also in 2019, I had the patrol lieutenant keep track of at times where we were either at shift shortage or at minimums, and there was a total of 233 days we were either short or at minimums. 88 of those days were military days, and we paid out 21 overtime shifts to cover those, and then the patrol lieutenant covered 61 of those. So fortunately, we have a very dedicated patrol lieutenant who's willing to cover some of those shifts as well. We've also updated a lot of our equipment within the sheriff's office. We were able to get some active shooter vests through some grants, and of course through our community that we have, that we're very fortunate to have and be part of. We were able to receive several donations. We have a second canine within the department, and he will be starting his training on Monday in the cities. And it's 3 months of training, and hopefully he'll be patrol certified by about July and ready to go. And we're very thankful for our community members for the support, and also for the board for your support as well to our canine program.
So that grant, that covers the whole thing, them staying down there for 3 months?
It will, yeah. We did raise funds for that. About 6 months, we fundraised for that, and that will be covered in there as well. We were able to raise about $37,000 in that 6 months between a couple fundraisers that we had, and just through some donations that a lot of our community businesses and our community members gave.
Good, very good. Okay.
Okay, thank you. Well, the correctional facility is fully operational, and that does include our tunnel. We're pretty excited about that. Our kitchen is fully operational, and we've been cooking out of there since the first week of February. And we're preparing food for detox, detention, as well as the jail. Another thing, Heart of Clay, which used to be Clay County Jail Ministries, is continuing to provide programming for our jail. And we're talking about expanding that now that we have our classrooms open, so we're pretty excited about that. In addition, we're working with the Moorhead Public Library for book donations, and so we'll be able to fill our library with these free donations. We're pretty excited about that as well. We have a lot of extra space, well, not extra space, but usable space that we haven't been looking forward to for the last 25 years, that we can offer programming to benefit our inmates at the facility. A couple other things, the jail staffing plan. We are actually fully staffed right now. This staffing plan is good for up to about 150 inmates in our jail. Right now we're currently at about 116. We have topped out at the 150 mark, but fortunately, our numbers dropped, so we had no concerns about our staffing. The jail bookings for 2019 were 3,447. The average length of stay was 12.34 days. Now, in the past, we've never been able to actually do a good average length of stay for us because our inmates were all over the state of Minnesota, and so we couldn't actually track that information. So 2019 was our first year of clean data we've had since 2006. So that's kind of an exciting thing if you like stats. So, so we can actually track everything more accurately through the state. So. Another thing, our average daily population in 2019 was 116.5, but our average daily population just for February was 123. So you can see we do have increases throughout the year. Our behavioral health unit is up and running, and it's pretty much always full. We have the Jail River Project, which is our Lakeland Mental Health, 2 full-time employees that come in and work with all of our population in the jail. We are planning to come back to the board and give a little more detail and explain some of the things we're offering, as well as the number of people we've assisted in our facility. We're looking to come back at this spring. Right now, I'm currently working on a contract with the Department of Corrections. There's 2 potential programs we're looking at, and one of them is a pilot project, and that will be for individuals who are parole violators who still have some prison time left on their sentence. They come to the jail because they violated the parole, but they maybe have 30 to 60 days left on their sentence. We're looking at keeping those people in our facility, and they would work with our mental health group as well. We'll provide some specific training opportunities for them. And by going to this kind of agreement with the Department of Corrections, they're willing to pay us $75 per day for an inmate, whereas any other DOC inmate is only $57 per day. So by having our River Project on board, they're looking at us as a pilot project to start this program. So we're pretty excited about that. There is another project we can work with them with the DOC for housing, and that would be for work release inmates. We're still working on a few of the details on that because since they are Minnesota individuals, there's sometimes a difficulty crossing the state line to work in North Dakota. So we're working out that kind of verbiage in our contract to see if we can make that work for us. The last thing is the jail has purchased and is operating our fingerprint machine. I did, as you recall, talk to you before about our fingerprint machine. We do the fingerprints for the community who have to have them for licenses, but as well as for the employees of Clay County. And it has been very difficult for us to be able to provide that service for our employees here at Clay County, but we are fully operational and we have expanded our hours, so it should be better for all the department heads out there that need to have their fingerprints done for their positions.
So where do people go if they want to get fingerprints done?
So if they're the public, we have it on our website. There's specific time slots for the public, but our employees, all they need to do is contact the jail and talk to our office associate, and she'll schedule it with them, and she's pretty wide open. She tries to make it pretty wide open for the employees.
Okay. And when's the kitchen gonna open up for a cafeteria for everybody?
Not happening.
No, not just checking everything.
Maybe next year.
So you have something coming?
Yeah, I just comment, I'm glad you bring up about what that pilot program or whatever, and I know, with the numbers the way they're at and if we're staffed to 150, even getting 10 contracted people in there a day, even if it was at what we used to pay at $50 a day, that's upwards of 200,000 revenue for you that you're there anyway, so I think
exactly.
any way we can take advantage of that, I think we should. And even if it might even be in our interest in some instances to exceed that 150. It could be even worth our while, even if it meant in addition to staff. We would have to do the math, but,
Right. Yep.
but.
There's always that potential there.
Mhm. So, anyway, thank you.
Gabe, you got something?
Yeah, it's been a busy year in emergency management too. I started off last January and then rolled right into a flood, which turned into a presidential declaration. We are just wrapping up now with the FEMA end of that on public assistance requests. I had a meeting in Georgetown last night preparing for this year's flood, and they have received their payment from FEMA already. So that's starting to roll in, which is good because FEMA's generally not too quick on that. A few things that I guess have happened more recently. This fall I attended the Association of Minnesota Emergency Management Conference in this fall of 2019. In September, myself, Morehead Hazmat Team, and Dilworth Fire Department co-hosted a train derailment exercise at the Burlington Northern Santa Fe rail yard, and that was attended by all of the fire departments in Clay County. So it was a really good exercise. We got to show off our drone and utilize that. A lot of water drafting and cooling exercises for the fire departments. It was good to get everyone together.
So the drone, do we have a drone operator yet in Clay County?
We do, so we're actually in the process of transitioning from Valley Water Rescue being our operators to Moorhead Fire. So Moorhead Fire is in the training process right now. They'll probably be operational sometime mid-summer where they'll totally take over. We're still gonna maintain, there's 3 members of Valley Water Rescue that are really proficient drone operators that will still have a role in that, but the deployment and response time is gonna be greatly improved by having it based out of Moorhead Fire. So that's in the process right now. In fact, on Thursday, myself and Jeff Wallen from Moorhead Fire have a meeting in Fergus Falls on drone operations. So,
Good, okay.
yeah, that's a great tool. We continue to work with Rural First Responder EMS services on dwindling numbers of members, particularly Felton Rescue. We've kind of did a public campaign to try to promote some interest in that, and it's really just not producing any numbers. So we did, last year, we met with the Rural First Responders and stuff. We met with the county administrator and Commissioner Mojo, and we'll plan a second meeting with that and just kind of go over what, I think we've kind of tried what we can do to at least garner some interest, and so that's a continued problem, and I think it's a problem statewide and I mean really throughout the Midwest. So that's just something we're working on, is to bolster those numbers. I attended the Governor's Conference in February of this year, which is put on by HSEM. I'm continuing to attend emergency management related trainings. Couple of items that emergency management was able to acquire was a new emergency management pickup with a plow on it, which we've utilized several times throughout this winter to respond to medicals and other calls for service that we would not have been able to respond to with squad cars. So it's been actually a really nice addition. I don't think we realized how much we would use it until we actually had it in this winter, especially the early part of the winter. We had plenty of snow events and stuff. Our mobile command trailer, we are upgrading that. That is in the process of being built right now. We're expecting delivery sometime in April. So that'll be a nice addition too. If you remember our old FEMA trailer, that's about ready to fall apart. So this will be a really nice addition. So hopefully it'll be ready to go late spring, early summer. So at the very least, it'll be on display at the county fair. We'll show it off there. Utilize it in Rolog, and obviously if we have any major events or whatnot where we need to deploy, it'll be a great addition to the sheriff's office and really regionally wide. I mean, we'll obviously, if any other agencies in the area have a need for it, we would deploy it and assist them. Let's see, in coordination with the City of Moorhead, we will be offering a series of CERT classes for county and City of Moorhead employees. And that CERT is a community emergency response team. Back probably in 2016, I think when Brian Green was in my position, he started that up, and there are some employees within the county that they receive a little additional training on assisting in maybe evacuating a building, or if we had damage assessments, if a tornado came through, just to kind of do a quick survey of the area and help relay that information to emergency responders and stuff. So we'll be starting up a new round of courses on that beginning in May. And that'll be open to, like I said, county and City of Moorhead employees. So we'll have some people on our campus and stuff that have a little additional training in emergency response type stuff, medical and fire and things like that. So Nicole Reno, who is one of our deputies, she is my assistant emergency management director, and she is kind of organizing that CERT class. So her and Rick Loveland from Moorhead Fire will be hosting that. She's doing a great job. She's really organized and does a nice job with that stuff. What else? Coronavirus, I hate to bring it up, but that's more of a public health response. But just, I guess so you guys are aware, we have received some guidance on responding first responder units. So I have put that out to all of our law enforcement, fire, jail staff, things in that area that may be having to respond to calls for service or dealing with people that are possibly have coronavirus. So I have been putting that out. And the other thing I've been looking into is a continuity of operations plan for the county in the event that it would get to the point where maybe we had to limit our hours of operation or employees coming into work to prevent the spread of it. So that's something I'm looking into, just how would we deal with that if it ever got to that point. So Other than that, I won't talk anymore about coronavirus because I think we've all heard plenty about it. 2020 spring flood preparations, that's been going on for quite some time already. I've been meeting quite extensively with Dave Overbo from the Highway Department, Bruce from the Watershed District, City of Moorhead. We've got good plans in place. Like I said, last night I had a meeting at the City of Georgetown to go over their flood preparation plans for the spring. I did meet with some of the township officials and kind of went over, their, I guess, what they need to do, how to request assistance, if people need volunteers and stuff like that. I will be also at the township meeting, I believe on the 16th of this month, and presenting to them again. So that's in full swing. Let's see, a couple other things. We did 2020, we will be doing a peer review of the county emergency operations plan. The county commission approved the plan last year. It's a 5-year process, and this year we're due for peer review. So that will be a group of, I guess, my peers from the region that look over our emergency operations plan for the county and suggest any changes that may need to be made. The other thing is we are just wrapping up our update of our county hazard mitigation plan. That is something that needs to be done in a 5-year cycle also, and that's what makes us eligible to receive any sort of funding from FEMA. So that's also a very important thing. That's been a long process. It began when I started here last January, and we should have it done and back to you guys for approval hopefully in June. And the last thing is Clay County and Cass County, Fargo, Moorhead, we are transitioning from the Code Red emergency notification system we use now to a different one called Everbridge. Our contract was up with Code Red. As a group, as a whole, we weren't really satisfied with the service we were getting from Everbridge and, from Code Red, I apologize, and Everbridge seemed to offer more, it's more user-friendly, so we are in the process of transitioning to that. And the plan is to kind of roll that out to the public probably sometime in May in coordination with Weather Awareness Week.
Is that gonna operate any different than Code Red?
As far as for the public, no, other than it'll be easier for the public to sign up for it or opt out of it, or select features that they want. Some people maybe don't want notifications for anything but tornadoes. It'll be a lot easier for the public to do that. You should be able to do that from your mobile phone versus having to sit down and log in on a computer or call me and request those changes. On the user end of it, it's a lot more robust. There's a lot more things we can do with it, and it's at least we're just beginning the training stages on it now. It appears to be much easier to operate, send out messages and things like that. So it's looking like a much better system already, but we're just kind of in the beginning stages of learning about it.
Okay.
So, any questions for me?
Keep the water away.
So far, so good.
No, any questions for him? Hey, thank you. Very good report, and
Yes.
you guys are doing a great job for the county, and keep up the good work, and it's nice to have you guys here.
Thank you.
Appreciate the support from the commissioners. I think I'm still up here.
Yes, and you're next.
I will stay in this chair, it's pretty comfortable.
That's great. And then the top, if she's
So,
got
I
email,
guess,
I'm laying it out, they never
move on.
Yeah. Next thing we're gonna do is the state of emergency, or you'll take care of that for us? Okay.
Excellent, yeah, so, again, I've been in close communication with Dave from the Highway Department, and, based on the snowpack we do have, and just the amount of saturation in the ground going into this fall, it is time to have the board consider a state of emergency. So my recommendation would be that the board declare a state of emergency for the county, and then I will get that information off to HSCM, if that be your wishes.
Okay.
I'd move resolution 2020-14.
Second.
Okay, we've got a motion and a second to declare state of emergency for Clay County.
I wonder, Mr.
I
Chair, you
think I
should read
want to
that.
read that before we vote on that. Whereas the potential spring flooding event will impact the population of Clay County and its cities due to a large amount of snow and already saturated soil. And whereas the potential spring flooding event will cause a significant amount of public property damage. And whereas Clay County Emergency Management Director requests the Clay County Board of Commissioners to declare Clay County in a state of emergency for the potential spring flooding event of 2020. Now therefore be resolved that the Clay County Board of Commissioners declares Clay County in a state of emergency for conditions resulting from the potential spring flooding event of March 2020, adopted by the Clay County Board of Commission this 10th day of March 2020. All in favor of the resolution?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay.
Thanks,
Thank
Gabe.
you.
We got time to get Kevin's thing in there. We got about 10 minutes.
Kevin, you wanna do your Buffalo watershed thing now?
Oh, do we have
What do we got?
enough time? Let's,
Yeah, we got about 10 minutes, so we're
oh,
on
okay.
schedule here.
Well, I can, I guess, if you're,
Okay, we had an addition this morning to our agenda on the Buffalo watershed. Take that now since we're out ahead a little bit here.
sure. Well, last night, Commissioner Mojo and I did attend the Red River the Red River Watershed District, Buffalo Red Watershed District meeting. And of course, with what had transpired in the media on Monday, and with a follow-up report on that meeting this morning in the media, several things need to be talked about. As this board knows, we had requested data for several reasons. We were concerned about meeting violations. We were concerned about hiring without approval, among other things. So we did receive some information from the watershed as requested from the Data Practices Act. And we questioned and were very concerned after receiving that about how business was conducted at the Buffalo Red River Watershed District. At the meeting last night, the issue came up regarding the hiring of an expert witness. And prior to that, by the way, I did receive from a source close to the Buffalo Red Watershed Board that they were going to be concocting, and I'm using that word, concocting, a reason that it was that the Buffalo Red attorney had the authority to hire this expert witness. And I think I just want to kind of put that to bed here, if I could. If you recall, one of the questions or requests that we had was to let's see, excuse me here. We requested minutes that showed who approved the hiring of an expert witness. It was question number 3 of our list of questions. And the response that we got from the watershed staff was, we do not provide any data for question number 3, as staff here agrees that no minutes exist in said regard. So that just sets the state. So, and now they're saying that they had authorized the attorney to hire expert witnesses. However, in our request question number 4, I received a document that was from it's a letter from the expert witness to the Buffalo Red Watershed attorney. And it says, per instructions from Jay Leach, please find enclosed my invoice for services supporting the Buffalo Red Watershed District. Now, if there was prior authority given to the attorney to hire this, why did it take Jay Leach's instructions to send the bill to their attorney? On the watershed districts, another data request that we had was regarding billings in regards to things that pertain to the diversion authority and any hiring and so on and so forth. And on the billing that was paid by the Watershed District on February 24th, 2020, there are a couple of things to note in there that's concerning. On that bill detailed on January 3rd, 2020, there was a strategy meeting at the Vogel Law Firm with key individuals present. And it included representatives of the JPA, their JPA's attorney, and a member of the JPA. That's very concerning, that they're going outside of their own people and discussing the lawsuit. More importantly, directly from the verbiage on the billing dated 1/28/2020, this is public record. There was the attorneys for the watershed billed for an email to Jerry Von Korf regarding the Buffalo Red River watershed decision to use Larry Prather and fund at 100%. Right away in their own statement, they state that it was a Buffalo Red River watershed decision to use Larry Prather, the expert. That is not giving the authority to the attorney. It's in his own bill that he states that it was done. I bring this up because it just leads to many other things. One of the things that Commissioner Mojo and I were concerned about, and we're still going to have the discussion about, is the transparency in meetings. And they have to include the proper way to go into executive meetings. The facts to me show that the Buffalo Red did indeed hire that expert witness, and they did it outside of any meeting. When we're told they were concocting this is troubling to me. Last night at the watershed, there's some other things that need to have discussion just based on last night that brings up old issues. There was a issue regarding voting. And as you recall, I was a really advocate for when the watershed district changed. We talked about this, that happened back in 2012. That it changed the makeup of that membership from 5 to 7 members, and it took Clay County from what was a majority to a minority vote, or could be a minority vote in any issue. You could have non-member counties vote for projects, whether it's in Becker County, Otter Tail County, or Wilkin County. All of that water, by the way, in the watershed flows to Clay County. Every bit of in the watershed, if it's going through the public ditches, whether it's Becker County's portion of the Buffalo Red, all of it flows. Guess where we get it all? At the same point in time, when we try to protect ourselves, we have a minority vote to get that done. I'm just rehashing some things here, but I bring that up because once again at last night's meeting, we had one of our own appointees to the Buffalo Red Watershed District say that he doesn't need to vote, that he's the president and he doesn't need to vote. as a board member who appointed them and as an elected person, there's no better way to track one's performance is how they vote. We're scrutinized by it every time as public officials, how we vote. And for one of our appointees and because he's president, and because during a roll call vote or a vote, there's already a majority voting that he doesn't have to vote, he or she doesn't have to vote, just doesn't cut it. I don't think it cuts it. I think, and then he goes on to say that they've tried to follow Robert's rules of order, but he doesn't have to. Under the parliamentary procedure that they have under their own bylaws, to deviate from Robert's rules requires a vote of the board to suspend the rules. There's a lot going on here that really are frustrating, and I do want to say there was another issue that was brought up last night. This goes far beyond just being about diversion issues, as Commissioner Mojo responded to them last night. As we all know, Bruce Albright has been a very respected administrator in the entire state of Minnesota, if not looked at as one that you look up to and that who others you'd hope would follow. And as a matter of fact, for years, the entire board was looked up to in that regard. Last night there was an issue that came up, and it was a very tense moment between Bruce Albright and the president of their board. Because the president of the board, because when he was talking, there was questions raised as to why you're doing it, and he said, this is the way we've always done it. Well, there's a track record that they use and they do. And I sat there and watched as that administrator was scolded. To me, he was scolded in the public meeting. And I just think that's uncalled for. And there's so many more things going on. I'm giving you the tip of the iceberg here. I think for today, I do believe that in regards to this voting, I think I don't think anybody should be able to hide because they don't think they have to vote. I think they still, I did ask Steve to get me the rules on the voting, and it says the president, has a right to vote on every issue, and it, whether it's mayor or whatever. But when we appoint somebody and when there's projects we should expect them to vote on issues. And one of the things I want to do today, and I know Commissioner Mojo and I have a lot of other things that I haven't addressed today that we still want to do based on your board's authorizing us to research this. There's more to come. And as Commissioner Mojo said in her response in the article in the news media last night, that this is not over. And but in the meantime, I really think that our board should send a letter to all of our Clay County appointees, to both the Buffalo Red and to the Wild Rice Watershed, that it's extremely important that they vote on issues. It's important so, for example, this coming fall, we have 2 managers up for reappointment. And if they haven't been voting on things, how do we know? They're supposed to be liaisons for us. And if they're not voting, how do we know if they're, upholding the interest of our board's interests or even watershed law? So I would encourage us to send a letter to all of our appointees for right now, asking them to vote on all issues before them and not suggesting that because there's already a majority, if somebody dissents, I want to know they dissented. And I think the public has a right to know. There's much more to come, but I'll leave it at that for now.
Okay. Do you need any action from the board now? Do we need,
Well,
do we need
I-
a motion to send another letter to the,
Well,
To the-
so what I can tell you is, and I know we're going to, Commissioner Mojo and I are going to meet. There's already a list of different items, more items that are pertinent to what we're talking about here in terms of meetings and,
well, we'll wait for Jenny to come back then and you
Yeah.
to discuss that.
but and again, I would encourage us to, at least for now, to consider sending a letter to all of our appointees that emphasizing the importance of voting on issues.
Okay.
I'll make a motion that we send that letter.
I'll second it.
Okay, we got a motion and a second. Any further discussion of sending a letter to the supervisors of the board concerning voting? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Steve, you'll see that letter gets put together and sent, and, all right. Anything further on that?
I think that's enough.
Okay. Okay, Rhonda, we'll go into the proclamation for Social Work Month.
Good morning.
Good morning, Rhonda.
A little lighter note. I am here just to, in honor of National Social Work Month of March, to more specifically honor our local and our county social service staff. You have over 60 social workers employed with our agency that just do amazing work. And I just want us to take this opportunity to recognize the work that they do. In the proclamation, I highlighted some of the work that they've done in 2019, and I think those numbers really show the folks in our community that they're touching and the lives that they're making a difference for. So I think you did get the proclamation, so I don't know if it's something you want to read, or you want me to read it, or?
Why don't you read that to us,
Okay.
since you are
I sure will.
advocating this?
Okay. Whereas the primary mission of the social work profession is to enhance well-being and help meet the basic needs of all people, especially the most vulnerable in our society. And whereas social workers serve, advocate for, and empower millions of Americans each day and push to ensure equal rights for all. And whereas Clay County social workers provide compassionate services that help individuals, families, and children cope with problems and become positive, contributing members to the community. And whereas in 2019, Clay County Agency social workers have completed over 5,500 intakes for services, served over 245 children in out-of-home care, conducted over 322 child protection assessments and 122 adult protection assessments, served over 900 individuals who are elderly or have disabilities and need support to remain in the community. They've licensed or certified over 400 homes for daycare, child foster care, and adult foster care. They've screened over 150 individuals for mental health and/or chemical health civil commitments, and they've conducted over 400 chemical health assessments. Now therefore, in recognition of the numerous contributions made by our social workers and for all they do to increase the well-being of individuals in our community, we, the Commissioners of Clay County, proclaim the month of March 2020 as Professional Social Work Month, and we call upon members of the community to join in celebration and support of social workers and the social work profession.
I'll move the proclamation.
Second.
And before we vote on that, I just want to comment on, it is so good to hear from all the work that is being done in Clay County, that we have this, the meetings that the sheriff department was here this morning, tell all what they've done. You know, you're here, we're gonna have some more reports this morning too, but it's so important that we get out to the residents of Clay County, what is all happening in this, these offices here, and it just shows here what, all the work that you guys have done, and this is a great thing to do here. So, with that, any further discussion on this? We'll vote on this March, this proclamation, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Nay.
Thank you.
Thanks, Rhonda.
And we got Matt Jacobson and Kimberly Savacho. We request the approval of registered land survey.
Morning, Commissioners, Mr.
Good
Chair.
morning, Matt and Kim.
So before you today, we have a registered land survey looking for approval. This is a little unique. This is something that's kind of, I'd say, relatively new in our county. Because this land is Torrens land and not abstract, in order to get it subdivided, we need to go through the registered land survey process.
Just before we go on, what is Torrens land?
Torrens title is just a different way to register property. It's under 200 parcels in Clay County that are actually Torrens. For each Torrens property, there's an actual certificate of title that sits in the recorder's office that shows who the landowner is and what liens or encumbrances may be against a piece of property.
Thank you.
Yep. So it's kind of like a plat, but it's not a plat. And so that's why it kind of needs to go and get approval from the planning department, the attorney's office, the county engineer, and this board as well. And so this is a quarter in Oakport Township. It's on County Highway 9, in between 80th and 70th Avenues roughly. And so the landowner is has already subdivided tract A from the entire quarter and is now looking to do B from C, essentially. So really what this is kind of a typical minor subdivision that would just get administrative approval, but because this is a Torrens property, it kind of needs that extra scrutiny of a registered land survey.
So is that whole tract C part of the Torrens thing? Or?
Yes, all of tracks A, B, and C are Torrens title property.
Okay, very good. All right, thank you.
So the subdivision, I'm assuming that still falls under the jurisdiction of the city of Moorhead because it's within the 2-mile jurisdiction?
It is just outside of that.
Oh, it is
Yep.
outside?
Yep.
So where'd you say it was, the 80th?
80th Avenue's right on.
Yep, it's right outside of the, of that,
Okay.
yep.
Okay, so I was thinking just straight north, okay.
Yep.
I know on here, I know on here it has approved registered land survey number and it has XXX, do you?
Yeah, it doesn't actually get assigned until it's actually recorded.
Oh, okay. So we don't need to have the number in there?
No.
Okay, we've got a motion by Jim to approve this,
Second.
and we have a second by Kevin. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay.
Thank you.
Approved.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll go on with the extend the architectural contract with Michael Burns for the Juvenile Center. We got Steve and Jim.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, Commissioners. As you are aware, we've been in the process over the last couple of years of expanding and remodeling the Juvenile Center. As part of that original plan, that we established a 24-month contract with the Michael J. Burns architect firm in the fall of 2017. We've been here quite often talking about some of the different issues and delays of went from the state code to weather-related issues to just project-related issues, and that 24-month contract has ended. We've had a series of meetings with James over the last few months in regards to how to best move forward. And the request that we have before you this morning would be just to extend the existing contract, same verbiage as we had before, and hopefully get through the end of this project. There's a document on the back. I would note that we plan to, I guess, mention it. We had an owners meeting yesterday. The project has hit another delay. We were hoping to be done by mid-March, and now we're looking at mid-April. And so I guess the other thing for the consideration of the board would be to make the adjustment. The proposal was from January of 2020 to April of 2020. I would maybe to move that into May 1st of 2020 if it would be up to the board's wishes. Any questions?
I'll move to approve with the May 1st date.
Second.
Okay, we got a motion to approve to extend the contract to May 1st. And a second. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay.
All right, thank you.
So now we're looking at when is this project gonna be done?
Mr. Chair, we're hoping to have it happen done by mid-April. So we're hopefully gonna find
There's
that.
some fire smoke damper issues.
Yeah. So.
It's mostly done. So
Yeah,
there isn't-
yeah.
there isn't
We
much.
just, we only have essentially we have the second floor north addition. That's the only place that isn't done yet, and that's unfortunately where we found the damper issue, so.
Very good. Thank you. And now, for the highlight of this morning, Kurt Cannon on Veterans Service Officer update.
Morning, Commissioners. How are everyone?
We're doing great.
Dandy.
Veterans Service Office for Clay County. Just consensus for our volunteers and our staff, just to thank you guys for your support in our, for our office and our veterans of Clay County. Couldn't ask for better leadership than we have now, so. Clay County, we have 3,736 identified veterans. That's recorded by the state for us. Our volunteers, our staffing ratio is, we have the 2 full-timers, me and Jennifer and Bonnie half-time, with 17 current active volunteers for our afternoon shift, so. They put in over 1,368 hours donated volunteer time in 2019, which is a ton of time. We did receive the 2019-20 operational enhancement grant of that $12,500 for operations in our department from the state. That's an application to apply for approval or denial, so it's been going pretty good since I've been here. And it helps out a lot with training events and purchases as copiers and things that we would more likely come and ask you for money. It goes through the grant, so.
Does that cover most of your salary too then?
No.
Oh, okay.
No. Clay County Veterans Court is going good. We are down to 1 currently. But we've had a few graduate, and we haven't heard back from them, so that's a good thing. So, very involved in Veterans Court with the team. Training, fall and spring for myself and this Walker's coming up here next week. And then, of course, our Accreditation National, which we both are, me and Jennifer. This year will be in Atlanta. Last year was Reno. And good training there, probably the best we get. We get our CEUs for accreditation at one time, knock it out and be done, so we don't have to go periodically, be gone 2 or 3 days out of the office 4 or 5 times a year. So Clay County in general, the general unemployment is 2.6, our veterans unemployment rate is 0.7%, as of the last numbers, the end of 19. And we are at functional zero for homeless vets, so meaning that if they're identified, they're handled and taken care of, as far as we can take them. You know, you still have to put your foot forward and choose to do the right thing to sustain your employment or your housing. So, but they are taken care of, and it really helps that our Minnesota Assistant Council for Vets is housed in the Family Service Center as of the, I believe they've been there almost a year now. So they're down the hall from us. So they handle the utilities, back payments, deposits, rent, so we can walk them right down the hall. So we correlate with them really well. Our MACV referrals, the half of year of 19, they don't have any recordable data because of staff transfers, but we referred housing 16 vets and employment 13 vets, half of 19. We've already jump-started in 2020 and referred 21 to housing and 9 to employment. So our totals half of the year, last year was 29, and we're at 30 already for 3 months. So I think the weather getting better in housing, sometimes we revisit those folks that maybe dropped off the radar and lost their housing. So those numbers are good. We continued outreach events to increase our numbers identifying vets. We had a ton of new vets in 19. I don't know the number right offhand, but that's a good thing for us. We got a lot of vets that either A, don't know we exist, which is our mindset to change, or don't want the services, which is...
Are these vets that are older vets, or are these?
Yeah, usually are Vietnam, Korean vets.
Okay.
Yeah, so our intent with all this outreach is to identify those. Maybe they're at an event we're at. And when we speak at AARP, and we get Kiwanis and all them events. So we do our outreach in Ulen once a month. That has been very favorable. Hitterdall, Ulen, even some from Holly come up and visit us at the nursing home. We have service connected, probably all of them that we see up there. So we average probably 1 to 4 vets while we're there for a 2-hour period. Stand downs at the VA, many speaking events, either the day or the weekends or in the evenings. So we continue that. So our goals this year is to maintain outreach events, and that's effort to identify the veterans. And that's while I'm in term or I'm in this position, is to identify as many as we can, and hopefully my follow-on will do the same. I don't think we'll ever capture all, but that's my intent. We educate staff, multiple changes all the time, so we have to be aware of all the new rules and regulations. And continue to identify additional resources for these vets. We have a multitude of resources in the state of Minnesota. If you're a vet in this Minnesota and you don't have help, it's your own fault, really, because you haven't reached out. There's, even in our Moorhead area, there's a ton of organizations that are willing to assist a veteran. So, and then my philosophy, always maintain a family, veteran-friendly atmosphere. So, and we do that quite well in the Veterans Office. So, we enjoy what we do. And that about sums up 19. We've been extremely busy. We probably average 3 or 4 appointments a day per each, and probably a good 10 to 15, 20 walk-ins. So they want to come back, and we welcome them. So.
Well, evidently they're becoming well-known in the county, so.
Yes, and that's a good thing.
Yes.
Yes.
And it's a good idea that you're going out to reach to the veterans.
Yep.
So you're going to Ulen and the different organizations. It's
Yep.
very good.
Yes.
Thanks, Kirk.
Yes.
You and your staff and the volunteers. Have you got enough volunteers right now?
Yeah, we're actually filtering a couple now. They're not getting any younger, and some medical needs are, but I keep them as long as they can get in there.
Well, I look back at the volunteer dinner you had not so long ago at the Legion, they were very enthused about it, so.
Well, it's
we-
a great program.
We have people watching our meeting here, so if anybody's interested, they can contact you at the Veteran Service Office.
Yes, we have an application process with a background check, and more than willing to put them on, so they don't work. It's probably one day every 3 weeks, a person, unless they fill in, so it's something
Great.
to get out. And, the thing about the volunteers is they want to be there. I don't push or pull. There's something that kind of breaks up the day of seeing a new face with,
Very good.
so.
Thank
And
you.
thanks again for your guys' support. It's been great working with you.
Thank you for the report.
Yeah, thank you.
Appreciate
Yeah.
it. Thank you.
Yeah, we're right on time here. The next thing we got is the One Watershed, One Plan. We got Bruce Albright for the Gulfville Watershed and Kevin with the Soil and Water Conservation District.
You can just use Jenny's chair here if you want, so.
And you brought along some more help that I don't know.
Yes, we did.
Morning, Kevin and Bruce.
Thank you.
How do we advance this when we want to change slides?
You can just
Up or down? No problem?
Yeah.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning, Bruce.
Thank you for giving us some time on your busy agenda, Commissioners, to kind of go over where we're at with the One Watershed, One Plan. I printed out a pretty map I was going to show you this morning and realized that that's laying in the printer in Barnesville. Just to give you an overview of the state of Minnesota and where they're at with this One Watershed, One Plan concept. Looking back this morning at some of the history, 2011, they had some roundtable meetings in St. Cloud, and I don't know, I'm sure Clay County had some commissioners there back then, but what was talked about is the management of water on a statewide perspective. So we have some of the state organized as official watershed districts. The county had a comprehensive plan regarding water, and then, of course, through the Soil and Water Conservation Districts, they also had a plan regarding water, and everybody kind of said, that's a whole lot of plans. But yet we're covering the same resources, we're covering the same area. Can there be some efficiency in all of us working together? And when you work together, that's better anyway, and just having one plan. So right now, the state is about half done with projects that are One Watershed, One Plans in various stages. Some are done, some are in the process. New ones will be starting here this year. So Governor Dayton, after that roundtable in 11, put in place the One Watershed, One Plan law. So 2015 is when this started. So we're kind of ahead of the curve, I mean, and, in some of the first ones here to get this plan done. Kevin, of course, you all know Kevin through the Soil and Water Conservation District. They've been an active participant, and of course, Commissioner Gross has been your designee representing the county in this process. And last but not least, as Matt Jacobson walked out of here this morning, he actually started this process with us. And of course, then you hired him as your planning and zoning director. So Matt is very familiar with the process and been a good asset to get this process underway. So we've got a whole lot of people involved here. There's actually 9 organizations that are coming together to make this a reality. And Kevin, feel free to chime in here anytime you want.
Sure, yeah, the 4 counties, it covers Becker, Clay, Wilkin, and then a part of Ottertail County, and I guess it's formed under a memorandum of agreement, and I know, Frank, you've been pretty instrumental in getting the wild rice. We're about halfway through that project. This came about just a short time after the Buffalo Reds was approved. And I know Commissioner Mojo has been kind of attending some of these policy meetings as far as the committee member for the board. So I guess we'll get into a little bit further here, but each district has a representation as far as having a planning committee member, advisory committee members, and then also policy committee members. But like I said, I know there's another slide coming up pertaining to that.
And I want you to identify this, I guess, or recognize it early on in the process here, is that these things just don't come falling out of the sky and people go, where did that come from? I mean, for Buffalo Red is going on 60 years, and we've had plans. And of course, our last plan, or the current plan we're working under, is about that thick. And that was a 2 or 3 year process. It's called a revised watershed management plan. You identify goals, you have a mission statement, you identify policies. We had meetings in Callaway, Holly, Rothsay. I mean,
Each region, I think you kind of had a
and
meeting, so.
the work of the Clay SWD, how long have you guys been doing
Well,
what you?
since 1991, there's been a need for a county water plan. It was transferred to us in 1998, and we just updated the county water plan in 2018. So the process, we knew it was coming, the one watershed, one plan, but the Board of Water and Soil Resources required an update. We were still under the old plan before the one watershed plan was adopted. So we created and, I guess, updated our water plan, the county's water plan. So that has all been incorporated into this. Each county has a water plan. It has all been incorporated into this one watershed, one plan.
Yeah, and you'll see as in our presentation here, that there'll be another chance for public review of the plan here. We had a public open house about a year ago. But what I want to note is, we've done our best to try to engage the public. I just had someone, and anytime you have questions about the watershed, we have a very active website, and now we're using Facebook. The meeting, like your minutes or meetings are broadcast on Channel 12 down in Marshall. We're doing the same thing now. You go to Facebook, watch a meeting. People find our website easy to maneuver, and they said, wow, you've got a lot of information there. So we're representing the public. This isn't, it's Buffalo River 1W1P, but hopefully this reflects the citizens that are in this area, their wishes. When you take an area the size of the Buffalo planning region, we still have broken that down into 9 planning areas. Obviously, the issues are different along the Otter Tail River versus the main stem of the Buffalo River that comes through Holly, called the main stem area up there. Northern Clay County. The issues in and around Moorhead are unique in and of themselves. You have a very heavily populated area. So by breaking this area down into 9 planning regions, you could focus then and get into more detail on a planning region basis. Now the lakes area way out east above Detroit Lakes out there, a lot of that is Tamarack National Wildlife Refuge. So I mean, the woods and the forest versus the rich valley ag lands we have on the flat valley floor here, you have different issues and concerns to manage.
And I being at Clay SWC, I'm worried about what's going on within the Clay County boundary. So of these 9 regions that Bruce kind of pointed out, I see 6 of them that we have, that fall under the Clay County boundary. So those are issues and concerns that, the lake country, we don't have a whole lot of lake country. We have about four lakes I think are registered with the DNR as far as aquatic invasive species with public accesses and those type of things. Primarily, like Bruce was saying, we're dealing with a lot of east to west, more of the Beach Ridge areas coming down into the flat prairie river valley.
And before I get too far here, my fault. Kathy Fenger has been administrative assistant in Barnesville now going on close to 5 years. So Kathy is here this morning, and as I kind of look towards retirement coming down the road here some point in time, Kathy will be the new face for the watershed district. So I'm glad to have her along here this morning.
Well, we're glad that she's willing to do that, but we hope you take your time.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner. Thank you. The other thing I should note is this plan, when adopted, will be a 10-year plan with a required 5-year update. So they'll require the partners all to come together at the end of 5 years and say, how are we doing? Are we meeting the progress that we intended to meet? Are we hitting our goals? Where are we at with it? So again, 10 years, a 5-year update. Always lots of committees. I mean, first off, this process comes out of the state of Minnesota and the Minnesota Board of Water and Sewer Resources. So this isn't Buffalo, you do one thing, Red Lake County, you do something else, Otter Tail River, you go do your thing. The process is very structured and is overseen and guided by Bowser. So they've kind of taken what works and given it to us to use it, those tools. We have a planning team, which are the kind of the paid people that work with this, myself, Kevin, his counterparts in Clay Becker Wilkin, Don Biumpas of the world, the county, Matt Jacobson serves on behalf of Clay County. We've got other people on that planning team. We're the go-to, there's an issue come up, we had a conference call yesterday morning. Yeah. The policy committee, the buck stops there in terms of they pay the bills, they are the ones that are going to say this plan is good and we need to go with it, are made up of people like Frank and other county commissioners. Each county, Lyle Hovland from Wilkin, Barry Nelson from Becker County. So those are commissioners and watershed managers and SWCD board members. Paul Krabenhoff is on this group. And then we formed an advisory committee, which is made up of like agency people. We have representation from the Minnesota Department of Health, Minnesota Pollution Control Agency, Minnesota Department. Yeah. So they're the advisory committee, and they help kind of put this plan together. And we've been at this planning process now for, about 18 months. I think we started like in the summer of 18, we waited for the grant and got some things and got things in place. We kind of officially kicked things off early in 2019, and here we are a year later, nearing the end. The process again, and again, this needs to represent the citizens of this area. I had an open house back in January. I think some of you were there. What the state would like to see out of this process is measurable goals. They call it PTM, prioritize, measure. Target is the second term there. Target, so identify what you want to do, and then last but not least, measure your success and see if you're meeting your goals. So we've set those measurable goals. You develop an implementation schedule and programs. That includes looking at funding. Where's the money going to come to make this stuff all happen? And then you get to the final phase, which is local approval. Actually, there'll be a public hearing held in the area, and then last but not least, the Board of Water and Sewer Resources will give the plan their blessing. Issues and resource concerns. Of course, we had the public house, so we took public input and comment. I think probably 50, 60 people probably attended that evening and went through the rooms or through the meeting process there and provided their comments. And we took all of that information around the outside edges. So we had information from the public kickoff meeting, the planning team, the advisory committee, all the existing local water plans up in the upper left-hand corner. We started the process stating, it was a 60-day notification where we advertised anybody that's got comments or information, please provide that to us. We throw in the policy committee, and then we did some online survey work. That takes you through this vertical steps in the middle there. We started out with 73 issues. We revised that list down to 30 issues. We then prioritized that list, and we ended up with level A, level B, and level C concerns.
We put each region on a large map on the wall, and each everybody who attended that public open house that last January, a year ago in January, went around and voiced basically in my backyard what's going wrong. What do I see are issues? What do I see are concerns? in my backyard. So like I said, all those concerns and issues, like Bruce said, there's 73 of them, we kind of condensed those. There's a lot of more of the same concerns that individuals in different regions had that they brought to our attention. So those were pared down to 30.
So, those priority issues, like I said, level A and level B, and this list is not intended to be all-inclusive. Not everything is there, but it gives you an example of some of the things that we're looking at. We know that a lot of our rivers and waterways are impaired from a state perspective in terms of they're carrying too much sediment. It's the Soil and Water Conservation District that does a lot of that work.
Right in our title, our name.
Yeah, and of course with sediment, then your phosphorus and nitrogen can move through the system and into our waterways. Some of the problems they're experiencing up on Lake Winnipeg. Stream bank channel instability and altered hydrology affects the stream banks. When you see a river that's twice as wide as it was 50 years ago, there's a reason for that, and it's Mother Nature saying, we need that room, or it needs to be that big to handle the water. Some of that comes because the watersheds have been altered. Not saying drainage is wrong or tiling is wrong, but we put a lot of pressure on these systems, and then you throw in abnormal rainfall events like we've been getting, however you want to sum that up. But climate change or Mother Nature, she can throw you some curves and you end up with some problems. And important for this area, because we may have dodged a bullet again this spring, but flooding is always, it's the reason Buffalo Red got formed way back when. After the 75 summer flood, people said flooding is a major problem and please help us deal with it. We built some sites and we've got a few more to go. Like I said, you know, the state's focus is measurable goals. We have a lot of tools today that we didn't have 10, 15 years ago. One of them being LiDAR. Who would ever have thought that we'd have 1 to 2 inch accuracy over the whole landscape for the entire Red River Basin? Out of that then came another tool called PTM app, where they can go out and actually, you can put a project into the system and it'll tell you what the benefits are going to be.
And you can identify potential hotspots out there where there potentially is an erosion problem. So, yeah, like you say, just what Bruce is saying there, the tools that we have available to us 10 years ago, we would have dreamed of, but they are a reality today.
This off to the right-hand side there happens to be sediment, but if you look at the map, red, of course, is our priority area, and that was identified through the computer and PTM app. Green, I mean, that's the heavy valley soils. We've got the city of Moorhead in there. I mean, there's not a lot of sediment. There are issues with water quality in the city of Moorhead, but sediment isn't one of them. And then, of course, across the bottom is the 9 planning regions and the various goals that were set for each of those areas.
That LiDAR, does that measure in the water, how deep water is too? It's just
No,
land?
Commissioner, if it hits water, it stops. Or if it hits heavy vegetative growth, so if it's flying over, plane's going over a heavy cattail area or something, the elevations will start to get fuzzy. They can make some adjustments to kind of correct some of that, but water is just like concrete, it hits it and stops.
Very good.
There's a little enlargement here of sediment in the same map we looked at. What our resources are our biggest priority, and they're identified there. Some of that's through the TMDL and watershed restoration and protection strategies. Where are the goals within the watershed? What can be accomplished in 10 years? And what's the long-term goal? Long-term goal would be to see our impaired waters get off that impaired waters list. Say we have clean water in the Buffalo watershed. The next step then is section 4 of the plan, which is implementation. How do you go about making that happen in those 9 planning regions? Again, as Kevin referred to it, those are all local people sitting down on those big maps and identifying what can be done in each area. And of course, what's unique is, and it's good that we separate there, is because again, the issues are different in Moorhead than they are up in eastern or western Becker County. And of course, we try to fix those issues with action items. Some of the Clay County people met at the end of the table there on the right-hand side, rolling up our sleeves and getting into it in terms of what needs to be done to make this happen. Money is always kind of key to making these things happen. I think I've reported to you in the last 5 years, Buffalo Red and its partners have brought in like close to $25 million of state and federal money. That's huge. If Orm wants to report on something, that would be good to report on. We've got baseline funding. What will come out of this One Watershed, One Plan process is that through, I believe it's the sales tax money, Lessard Sams, those dollars go to Bowser, and anybody who has a One Watershed, One Plan is going to get baseline funding based on the size of your watershed. For Buffalo Red, I think that's going to be about $500,000 every 2 years. So that'll be dedicated funding that will come to us on a 2-year cycle. You don't have to apply for those funds.
Non-competitive, that's kind
Non-competitive.
of the key, huh?
That funding will come, and we've identified that as the level 1 baseline dollars. You add in normally what the watershed district could raise, that's level 2 funding. And then level 3 is the outside funding if we were to get grants from the state of Minnesota, Lessard Sams, use some of the farm program programs that Kevin works with through the NRCS. And of course, with those dollars, I mean, it can be a lot of money, but it's still limited. You try to prioritize that work and, you know, put the money where the biggest bang for the buck. We have 5 different types of action items. I mean, there's education and outreach is always huge in the whole watershed concept, continuing to keep people informed. We're just doing the job of hopefully what the citizens want us to do. Data collection and monitoring, that's that measure component of PTM. Take a look at what you're doing. Are you meeting your goals? Have you done this better? Did your project work or didn't work? Maybe you had some benefits that come out of your project that you didn't even identify before you built the project. Regulation and enforcement is something that I believe is a necessary tool. You have to have that. We need rules and laws. I think we've tried to work with all of our citizens, and nobody in the watershed has ever ended up in jail for violating the watershed law. There have been some fines issued, but they don't spend the night in the jail for that. But sometimes you need them. Somebody cuts a road. We've all seen those cases. The county road gets cut and they dump the water, and we can't have that. So that's where the rules and regulations come in and enforcement. The blue there, capital improvements, that's the big stuff. How do you build a $10 million Wolverton Creek restoration project? They fall into the capital improvements. And then projects and practices are where all of our neighbors and cooperating agencies such as Soil and Water, they work with the landowners when it gets down to what can I do in my field? Do I need a buffer strip or?
More individualized projects.
Yeah.
That's kind of our bread and butter, I guess. Our landowners coming to us wanting something done that they see a problem. I think with these funds coming in, we'll be out looking for potential sites with some of this PTM identification of project sites. Those are things that we'll be out trying to drum up the landowner interest.
And last fall, there was a soil health day in Barnesville. That's Clay County landowners that are dealing with soil health. And I would encourage you that the next time we have a soil health clinic in Clay County, that if you can get out there and spend the day looking at what these guys are doing, for me, it's very educational and exciting to see.
Next Monday.
Huh?
Next Monday in your office.
Okay, we're talking about some soil health
Yep.
issues, so. You know, the planning regions using PTM app, then we can take a look at where would you put filter strips, where might you have wascobs on the top there, which are water and sediment control basins to slow the runoff. Once you kind of get from Holly and east, you see these gullies in people's fields. Wascobs can fix those. So you can, using the tools we got now, you can identify where can you get the most bang for the buck if you target the type of practices we show on the right-hand side. You then can measure what those targeted projects and practices will do in terms of meeting your goals regarding sediment loss or phosphorus issues. Identify the most cost-effective project and practices by target. You take that money then and you put that into the various programs and practices that I showed you earlier. And you can see there the responsible lead agents on that, and I'm seeing SWCD on most of those. Partners off to the right include the watershed and Bowser and NRCS and the cities and the counties. But a lot of this stuff on the field level is going to be done with the soil and water people. And then you put the dollars to it on the bottom. Again, that level 1 funding, which is the state's base money. Level 2 is add in the watershed funds. Level 3, if you get outside grants. And brings us kind of to where we're at here today. You know, these implementation programs. There's the funding, local, state, federal, and all sources. I mean, the dollars get huge, way over in the right-hand corner there, 88 million. That's not all going to happen in 10 years, but it's a goal. And we have the draft plan. It's available on our website. I gave you the overview here today. We will have a meeting the end of this month, and the date is yet to be determined. I know, Frank, they set out a poll yesterday about availability. The SWCD people were going to be gone on the scheduled date of March 25th.
Right, we have our legislative day at the Capitol over those 25th and 26th, but it sounded like maybe it would be a couple of options, maybe.
Sometime maybe yet this month or
Right,
real
March
early in
31st or
April.
first part of April, correct.
So the policy committee will then approve this. It'll go out for 60-day notification. We'll advertise and hold a public hearing at the end of those 60 days. That then goes to the Bowser Regional Board and then eventually to the state board down in St. Paul for their approval. And then local adoption. Then we say we start using this. And those other 3 committees we talked about, the policy, planning, and advisory, they're going to go away, but a new committee is going to be formed, kind of called the implementation committee. So we'll meet on an annual basis to say, here's the dollars, where do we want to target these monies? What are we going to do in the upcoming year? And that might be once a year, twice a year.
Bring a project to the table, or
Yeah.
whatever,
You said there, something went out concerning the meeting, and
Yeah, I believe a poll was sent out, Frank, yesterday electronically on dates, so.
okay.
And it might have gone to Jenny also, I think, between, do you get the same thing for the Buffalo Red as you do at the Wild Race, Frank?
Well, I thought it was in the policy on both of them.
That's
Yeah,
what I thought.
I'll take a look, Frank, to make sure you're on there, but it went out yesterday.
Right, yep.
I mean, it's been an interesting process, and what I want to leave you with is this doesn't get cooked up in a darkened room with the shades drawn by somebody that's out to do some evil conniving here. This is a plan that represents the citizens.
Yeah.
It's their plan, and I know all of us here will do our best that it stays, and it's a citizen's plan. So, questions or comments?
I have just 2. This does not change a process for permit applications for projects.
Correct, sir. This recognizes that we need enforcement and regulations, but the rules do that. This does not.
Yeah, this deals with like the goals of the TMDLs and that type of thing, and the
Correct.
impaired waters, and this doesn't have anything to do with a watershed's ability to create a management district.
It identifies that a water management district can be a potential funding source, and there are 8 or 10 steps that the state outlined in terms of how you would do that. That's identified in here, but that is a separate process. It doesn't give you the authority to just go out and do it. It identifies it as a tool, a funding source, but you have to follow the steps to make it happen.
Okay. So the steps that have been in place to create a water management district in the Buffalo Red River Watershed District won't change?
Won't change, no.
That's, okay, that's what I want to know.
Yep.
Those are, to me, those are 2 critical things that still need to have that local control.
Right, and we did a water management district on the Wolverton Creek project, and there the landowners felt it was an acceptable way to raise some local funding.
Thank you.
You know, serving on the committee, you can see, like Kevin said, we started out with 73 projects, something like that, and that was from all different agencies, and all of a sudden, you found out, these are identical, we're gonna combine them, and got it down to 30, and that's, now I'm finding out with one watershed, one plan. I was wondering before, you know, didn't you guys have a plan before? And you
Yeah,
did,
yeah.
you know, but everybody had a
And
plan.
so did we. That's,
Yeah,
that's
you had a
some of the
plan.
problem.
So, and like I say, once you got them all together, you find out, hey, some of these are identical, and, one watershed, one plan, does make sense, and,
Well, and when you're having fun, I mean, 10 years you go, well, man, that's a long time, but I think we all know that 10 years, you get it adopted and 10 years go by real quick. There's lots of work to do, and it's been a great job for me and great working with all of you and the citizens that we represent, because it's been a lot of fun. It's been interesting work, very interesting.
I know that there's very, very seldom is there ever a controversy in water or or difference of opinions, but in the case of this where you're trying to consolidate all these different entities, there is a process in place where, say, the SWCD might disagree with the position of others. There's a process to deal with that.
As you would travel around the state and we don't have, there isn't these partnerships and cooperation that we've seen up here. We've been very fortunate that we've all worked together very well. And they're not the turf wars, but you go 50 miles south of here and there's a different mentality or a different feeling about some of this stuff.
And I said that earlier today on a report that I gave, and I complimented you, and Kevin, I can say the same about you, in that regard that we have in this area. But I just, the ability to, anytime you consolidate a number of agencies into one plan, I'm curious as to how some of those issues that could be controversial amongst your entities would be dealt with.
Well, I think that's yet to be decided, you know, we're all gonna come to the table, I think, with, here's what we think is our number 1, 2, 3 project in Clay County. Well, Wilkins gonna do the same, Becker's gonna do the same. Somehow we're gonna have to, you know, agree to, you know, we'll let you have yours this year or your number 1 pick or something. Somehow, that's all yet to be ironed out, but I can see exactly what you're saying, Kevin, because I mean, water does not stop at county lines. Right now, we've been kind of working within Clay County, but the watershed, you know, encompasses all these other ones.
Most of the water flows into Clay County.
That's true, yeah.
That's very true.
And like you say, that's, you know, primarily, we've been kind of looking out for Clay County, but definitely we'll be working together as a group, and like you say, not all bad.
Again, thank you so much for
well,
having us.
aside from all that, Bruce, I do want to thank you when I call you, like last week when I called you, whatever. Your response is so quick and so accurate. Thank you so much for your help.
Thank you, Commissioners.
Thank you.
You guys need a break, or can we go on here? You want a little break? Okay, just 5 minutes. Okay, we'll call the meeting back into session here. And the first thing we've got now is the bid opening for the landfill cell construction, excuse me. And Kirk, you're gonna handle that for us.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, as we've talked about before, we're going to be doing some construction out at the landfill. This year it's a cell expansion, and with that, we're also going to be doing some leachate collection and also a boiler for the landfill shop out there. So it's a quite extensive project, and we were pretty excited about it. Essentially, we had 3 bidders that submitted bids, and what I'll do today is I'll read the bids, and there's a few things that just as we go through it that I should highlight. The first thing is to make sure they have filled out the bid form. The second thing is that they have a bid bond that they've submitted. The third thing is that total firm fixed base price. That's basically includes mobilization, final cover, cell construction, leachate collection, and landfill gas system with the flare. So that's what's included in the total firm fixed base price. In addition, if a bidder wants to not construct a perimeter pipe around the perimeter landfill, we have the opportunity for them to take that price out of the overall bid. So if that's the case, then we will note that.
And then final thing is basically the total firm fixed price and the total alternative deduct, if they do deduct that. So with that, I brought my able assistant who's going to be opening the bid packages up, and I'll read the bids for your review.
Did you have any addendums to it?
Mr. Chairman, we did have 4 addendums, and they were all listed on the request.
So they'll have to be acknowledged in the...
Right. So, if you would.
The first one is Blombeck Construction.
Okay, the first one, as Kathy mentioned, is Blombeck Construction, and they do have a bid bond in here, and the total fixed base price is which is going to be interesting to try and find here.
The last page.
Okay, here we go. Okay, the total firm fixed base price is $2,930,458.42.
400 what?
$458,000. Dollars. So it's $2,930,458.42.
They acknowledge all 4 addendums?
Yes, they did. The alternative, if they want to deduct the bid, they deducted $118,550. And when you subtract that, the bid is $2,811,908.42. So that's the first one. Okay. Second one is Comstock.
This one?
And, yeah, I'm open the first one here.
This one, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And they have provided a yes, they've included a bid bond.
Bond.
And the, did you open this? I got it.
I started to. Okay, the bid bond for, or the bid for the total firm fixed base price for Comstock is $2,706,286. That's $2,706,286 million. And they also had a deduct, and the deduct for that was $192,230.
$192, $230. And the total fixed base price and alternative deduct is $2,514,056.
Now it's all four addendums.
Yes. The last one is Bursky.
Who?
Bursky, B-U-R-S-K-I. And they're from Rice. And they do have a bid bond. And their bid price, the fixed price is $2,405,581.70. Again, that's $2,405,581.70. And they also had a deduct price, and their deduct price was $143,600. And their total firm fixed base price plus the total alternative deduct is $2,261,981.70. Again, that's $2,261,981.70. Look here one more time. It's $2,930,458.
Kirk, was there an estimate on what this was supposed to?
Yes, the estimate, the engineer's estimate was $2.5 million. So what I'd suggest is that we'd like to take a look at these bids, go through it line by line, and then come back with a recommendation.
It was 2.5 million, that was for including the perimeter.
Right.
Including what?
The perimeter piping.
The perimeter piping, without the deduct, so.
And that was actually the construction bid price, right?
Right.
It didn't include the engineering and...
No, Mr. Chairman, that's exactly right. So that's kind of what we'd like to do, is we'd like to take a look at it line by line, come back 2 weeks with a final recommendation.
Very good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
But you did those four addendums,
They were all there. Yeah,
Okay.
everything's there.
Was there a bid bond for the first bid?
There were bid bonds for all of them, everybody had a bid bond.
Okay, Dave, you wanna bring your gang up here?
Thought we tried to outnumber you today.
Pretty close.
We got 3 items on the agenda today for the highway department. First item is approval to advertise and set letting date for 3 small bridge removal projects. These are the ones that are little wooden bridges that were more than likely constructed with county forces 40, 50, 60 years ago or more. We designed those with a concrete box culvert. We run the plans through the state, and we have gotten bridge bond funds that finally kind of trickled through. for the County Road 2 and County Road 12 location, and then we plan to utilize township bridge funds for the Morgan Township project. So proposed letting date on that would be April 14th at the county board meeting on that date.
You say County Road 2 or County Road 8?
2.
No move to approve.
Got a motion and a second to approve those, to advertise for those bridge replacements. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay.
Our next item is an MOU that we have been working with the watershed on 3. It's real similar. The only thing, these aren't actual little wooden bridges. These are actually culverts that are pulling apart, and they're starting to suck some of the road material, and we're creating some road hazards out there with the location. Two of the 3 structures are on township system, and one is on County Road 7. And it's on, I believe it's on ditch 11 and ditch 1, and this is in the Buffalo Red River Watershed District. Their engineer is doing the design work. They'll do, and we'll run those plans through the state as well. We won't be able to get bridge bond funding for the County Road one, so we use local County Road dollars for 50% of the project. The watershed will pay 50% of that one, and then we will be able to get town bridge funds for the other 2 structures. So we did put together our MOU in the same fashion that we've done them before with small cities and the watershed on similar projects. We discussed it a little bit at Highway Tracking Committee meeting, and I believe, Kevin, did you know if this was approved yesterday at the watershed meeting, or?
They talked about it. I don't know that they.
Okay. I'll check with Bruce and Eric Jones to see where they're at with that, but I guess I feel it's a good way to remove some of the these culverts that are kind of causing problems. They're doing a bulk of the work, and they're doing a cost share being that they're over the ditch system, so I believe it's good for the county and good for the watershed and good for the locals as well.
Yeah, they discussed a couple of different county projects, and I can't remember which one I think they did approve that.
Okay, we got a request for a memorandum of understanding with the Buffalo Watershed to replace drainage structures.
No move.
Second.
A motion by Grant, second by Kevin, to move ahead with that memorandum of understanding. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Move on to the number 3.
Our last item is some 2020 equipment. We've got a few motor graders that are coming out of warranty or already out of warranty. What we'd like to do is replace 4 of our machines. One of them would be our current spare machine. We've got 11 districts in the county, and we've got 1 spare machine. And it gets used actually quite frequently when the other ones either are in the shop for repairs or broken window, flat tire, or in addition, and a lot of times Kim, our maintenance supervisor, jumps in the machine and he goes out with the guys and does training with them, helps them out, or if somebody is sick or gone, I guess it gets used quite a bit. 3 of the 4 machines we'd like to purchase with new John Deere machines, and we would like to replace the Caterpillar with another Caterpillar. It was about, I think it was maybe $5,500 more to go with the 1 Cat, but I guess I feel there's a lot of value in having a machine in each category. It gives us a good feel for, knowing which machine is more reliable, or how reliable each machine is, how the fuel economy is, and how what the repairs are, and as well as resale. It gives us a little real good idea on how the 2 machines work. I mean, they're direct competitors. They're both really good machines. We got really, really good trades from RDO on the 3 machines that we'd like to replace, to the tune of almost $50,000 apart between the 2. So it was pretty obvious decision, I guess, on why we would like to replace 3 of them with John Deere machines. And these are the exact same machines, same horsepower, correct, Kim?
Yep.
This is with the snow package, so it'll come with the wing, front wings on there, as well as the snow tires. It's our exact same specified machine. The John Deere machines, it's through the Cooperative Purchasing Program, Sourcewell. It used to be NJPA.
We used to utilize the Minnesota State bid, but more recently, we've been getting much better pricing through Sourcewell. And both vendors quoted us using the Sourcewell contract. The John Deere machine is $354,114.10. And then the Caterpillar machine is $361,075.00. I did talk to Lori a little bit. As you look on the spreadsheet in front of you, between the monies that is in the ISF, Internal Service Fund, and the trade numbers, we're about $25,000 short. We will have a little surplus on the next item, the batwing mowers, about $7,700. So we're about $18,000 short, and I talked it over with Lori a little bit. And the way the Internal Service Fund works and how it's funded, you know, not every piece of machinery needs to be replaced all in 1 year. If we did, we'd probably be in a lot of trouble. But being that we only replace machines as they come due, there's enough dollars in there to more than cover what we need. So the $18,000, she said, she would work it out within our current balance of how our account sits. So I believe our local levy is to the tune of about 900 or $1 million, 900,000, $1 million is what we allocate for highway department annually into the Internal Service Fund. So we've got a pretty good chunk of money that we've been putting in there every year.
I know we discussed this at highway tracking, and the purpose of buying one Caterpillar too is to keep the training on all of them, so we felt that highway tracking, that would be a good idea to do that, so. One of the boards.
I move approval of the purchase of the graders.
Okay, we've got a motion by Kevin, second by Jim. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
Okay, the last item is replacement of 2 of our 4 batwing mowers. These are the 15-foot mowers that you pull behind your mowing tractors. When we came to the board, I believe it was in 2016, we replaced 4 at one time. That was when we had the bush hog mowers, those red ones. And when we bought those, they were, I don't know, they kind of cut back a little bit, and those things were falling apart. The decks were all ripping apart. And we brought our highway committee out and took a look at them, and we talked about how much money we were putting into these things, and we bought 4 at one time. And when we bought those 4, we kind of discussed possibly not doing that again. Maybe we could replace 2 one time and 2 the next year, so we don't have 4 all in 1 year. And the idea of purchasing a little heavier, more durable mower that costs more money was that we might be able to do that, and we've found that we can do that. So we'd like to do is replace 2 of the 4 this year, and the 2 that we're replacing are more in need of replacement than the other 2. So I think we've had good luck. We're very satisfied with the mower that we're purchasing, and we would like to purchase 2 more. There again, it's the exact same model as what we're turning in. They're giving us $10,000 on trade, which kind of, I think, shows that it's a good mower after 4 years of quite a few hours and quite a few miles of usage on there. We're still getting $10,000 in trade, which is pretty good. The mowers went up a little bit in price. I think it was maybe, about $2,500 or more, so it didn't go up a lot in the last 4 years, but it went up a little bit. But our Internal Service Fund has an excess of about $7,696, so that would kind of offset what we're short on with the graders. So the vendor is Butler Machinery. This would be utilizing the Minnesota State bid. They made up in Canada. I think they're a real good machine. We're real happy with them.
Yeah.
Second.
Okay, we got a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Again, we discussed this at highway tracking, and we thought it was a good idea to go with the 2 years replacing. Call for the question, all in favor?
Right.
Opposed? Okay, motion passes. Anything further? Guess we'll have a meeting a little bit later on.
Appreciate the support on everything that we do, especially with our equipment. I think that's really, our guys appreciate it, and I know it's very important to have good equipment, and sure appreciate your support.
Yeah, good work, guys.
Thank you, Dave. Okay, now we'll move into Master planning presentation, the government service.
Need a few.
Building.
I'm gonna end up drinking all this.
Do you need me to make more?
I'm gonna be here all day, so it wouldn't hurt.
Need more room, we got some room here in the end. Need one more commissioner today.
Oh my gosh, Steve's joining us.
Good morning, Mr. Chairs, Commissioners. As you are certainly aware, this last July, after we kind of had many discussions at the board level about space issues, both within our courthouse and our family service center, this board agreed to enter in a contract with Klein McCarthy to look at the courthouse, at the family service center, and eventually they also took a peek at our motor vehicle department. And so they're here today. We've had a series of meetings, and I'm not going to steal their thunder because I know they have a process here. And so they're here today to present on the findings of that. We established a committee within our county, Commissioner Haney and Commissioner Gross, along with a number of department heads that are listed here in the document, have met over the last 7-8 months, and have kind of fine-tuned the presentation or the options that you're going to hear about this morning. And so with that, I'll turn it over to these guys.
Well, good morning. Steve said take our time, but if you have questions as we go through, if it's later in the presentation, I can say we'll come back to that one. But certainly if you've got questions as we go, feel free to ask those questions. Just the history that Steve talked about, to start the process, we issued questionnaires out to all of the different departments, agencies, just to get their feedback on where they should be located, what their preferences were, what spaces were they short. So we took all of that, gathered that together to figure out where the needs were in which buildings. As you're well aware, you've built the new jail, new joint law enforcement center, so the focus really was on the courthouse, family services, and on the motor vehicle department was also included in that. So that was the history of that. As we started getting into gathering those questionnaires and working with George at Family Services, we also had the engineers come take a look at the mechanical electrical systems on the Family Services building, just to see what we were getting into there as far as those conditions. And then we also, as we were looking at the courthouse, we actually looked at some of the structural. So that information's in your package, but that's kind of the history of the beginning parts of it, and then we got into projecting out those needs, took a look at some of the spatial floor plans just to get an idea of how departments might move around and what was needed, what could be done internally versus externally. So moving through there, the analysis of the structural for the courthouse, we looked at different options to expand it horizontally to the south or vertically above the courts. Both of those were deemed, we'll save those for the future. And then the idea that the committee is looking at pursuing would be to basically turn this into the courthouse, so anything that's non-judicial would then move out of the courthouse, expand on another property, and do a government services building, and then make this building just courts. That was deemed one of the higher priorities. To get a courtroom was needed. They're using the first floor as kind of a hearing room referee situation. So that was one of the key needs was in the courts. So we were looking at that. As far as the systems, you'll see later in the report, the systems for the family services, if you're staying in there, The idea would be that you can certainly, as a tenant takes some space or the county takes over a space that might be vacated, to remodel those and try to do as little as possible during the remodeling. And then at some point, we're figuring that most of those systems have exceeded their life expectancy. And at some point, you'd be looking at potentially a major renovation, or do you keep that building active or move in a different direction with that. So we certainly have figured that in all of the different phasings. The biggest difference between the different options, this is again, some of this material's in there. This is the space program, so it's color-coded by department. So if you go onto the floor plans, you can see the colors should be matching up with these to give you an idea. In the first columns, it's listing how many employees, how many future employees they have, what size they are. So if they had current needs, that's what they were short of space today, and then projecting out what things did they need in the future, and then how much additional space did they need. So those are starting to total up. So the most of the needs were in the social services and public health areas. Government services had some needs, and then courts also. That's where the bulk of the needs were. And just about every tenant that's in family services was projecting some kind of needs. So obviously, if you don't add to those needs, you need to start moving some agencies out, or physically or cancel their leases and let them leave. So we did look at a few different options in that regard. We looked at different sites if we're looking at, because the campus is pretty tight, so what we were looking at was taking the assessed value of properties and taking a look at if we went to the south. Certainly, depending on the phasing, you could buy 1 or 2 blocks, depending on what you decide for the phasing that you deem is most important. We looked to the south. That was the most expensive. One of the biggest advantages of that would be that it would provide some overflow parking and some needs for the family services because it's across the street. We looked at also option C. The committee wasn't as fond of that one because it is across the street, so now we're starting to move the public and staff potentially back and forth across the street to get to different functions on the campus. Option B, I think, is the preferred option, with, if we're buying it in phases, looking at the east phase first and then the west phase. Again, depending on what you deem that we want to start with any expansion and the needs on that. And then also looked at option D, locating it farther from 11th Street. So those numbers are in here. We certainly can go through those, but giving you an idea on areas and the costs of each city block as we start to look. The next slide is taking a look at those options. We've got the real difference when you see this is when you're looking at option number 1 versus option number 2, you're seeing them on each side of the screen. So essentially, what we're projecting for phase 1 is to get the court space that's needed, moving those non-judicial functions out. So in option 1, we're looking at doing a government services building that would include all of the administrative, the auditor, the administration here, assessor, moving those functions to, and creating a new building. Also moving the testing for the motor vehicle, moving that into that building also. So that's really what's in that building. The comparison to it in option 2 is really looking at doing a family, in this one, that also includes moving in social services and the public health. So that's then resolving the courthouse by moving out the non-judicial functions. It's helping out family services by moving out those large county functions that are short of space and inefficiently laid out where they are, and moving them into one combined building. So you'll see in option 1, you're doing more things up front, but that's the biggest difference between the two, is including the social services and public health functions in option 1. In option 2, you see it's really dashed in really as a future item. So that's probably the biggest thing. So in both options, you're doing the administration functions that are leaving here. You're doing that with motor vehicle. In the family services, in both options, we're moving the public defenders from the family services building into the courthouse. We don't have enough space in the courthouse to be able to bring back probation from the family services into here or bring them back from off campus. So those are probably some of the bigger things. Both options, again, you can look at this in a future phase, but right now, both options are showing a detox facility. The biggest difference that you'll see when Ben and Nick go through the numbers on that is that when we came in with the pre-design, you saw the numbers were closer to 10 million. What that was is the current facility is at 16 beds. They were looking at adding another 16-bed program. So the pre-design was really a 32-bed solution. What you're seeing in all of our work here is really looking at a 24-bed solution. So when you start to see some of those numbers, that's really what was shrinking the cost of detox. But right now, that was, the committee thought that that was one of the higher needs. Certainly, we looked at combining it with the government services and having one large building, and we had so many different functions that were really looking for first floor space due to high public volume and traffic. So really what we went through was just take a look at, and not mixing clientele, just go ahead and do a detox building separately. So then between the two options is, do you want to build it in more phases like option 2, and then just when you do need family services, go ahead and move those over to join the detox and keep those things together, or you build it with the county government services at the front end of that. Doing okay, Steve? Yep. Okay. So this is really just going through, giving you an idea on, in the two options. If we're looking at Site B, we'd be looking at the main building to the front, detox, and a future social services toward the backs of the site. So that's just giving you an idea of what we were looking at for options C and D also. So I went through this, so if you're looking at this, you get an idea of the county government services, what it's all including, and this is the larger solution. So that's doing, like I said, the difference that you see between here, where this is blank here, you follow it across. Option 1 includes the social services, child support, financial, and the public health WIC. So that's the difference between the two options. You're building more up front. Motor vehicle is moving into that building, so that property, the testing stations and everything as far as the vehicle driving tests will stay up there, but they would move into the county building. The courthouse, we're proposing the exact same thing with that, is that court administration has room to grow. We're moving the public defender in, and then what we're looking at doing is a two-phase approach. Is in phase 1 of the courthouse, we had looked at doing courtroom on the other side of the corridor with judicial chambers to the north, and then you could do a second phase doing a courtroom in this room with a judicial chambers. And what the group decided was, rather than trying to do that in 2 parts and have all of that construction spread out over a period of time, that it was probably just as easy to do it all at once. So we were at least getting the courtroom shelled in and finished out. So that's all included. So both options, we're projecting to go ahead and build out the courthouse and get that finished at the first part. As far as family services, the biggest change is in the first one here that you see, those social services and public health go to the new building. In the second option, they certainly can be done in the future. So that's one of the biggest changes. And then detox, we're planning on 18,000 square foot detox building. Again, it's a separate building, so it can be done at any time. The group has got it listed in one of the earliest phases. And then the community services, really, if you don't do it new over here with this, then you do it in the future. Still following me? All right. So that's what we were looking at, just to give you some idea of the costs, and Nick and Ben will go through this. But what we were listing, again, what you're starting to see in the first part of it is, if you're doing the larger government services building, that one is about a little over twice the amount of doing it, separating and leaving family services and public health in the family services building and trying to expand them in there. So that's where the cost difference is between these two. You'll see the same cost for the courthouse because that work is identical. The family services, there's more space that's vacated if those functions leave to a new building, so there's more remodeling costs to expand the current renters or future renters. So that's where you'll see a difference in cost there. The detox is the same cost. And then what we identified here is what I was talking about was if you don't do those functions, family services or social services and public health, you do them later. The cost difference, you'd be saving about $19,000 by not doing it right away. That number, $19 million, that number grows to a little over $24 million if you do it 15 years from now. So that's part of the analysis of how soon do they need that space? Is it easier to bond money at a lower interest rate now? If that's less than what inflation rate is, what are your, what do you believe the needs are, and how do you want to do those kinds of things? We try to set it up so to give you the most flexibility of doing bits and pieces and taking it in phases, or you certainly can do more things together in one building. So that's where the future was. And then I mentioned earlier, if you were looking at completely replacing the family services building, what the cost would be there. In 15 years, we're projecting with the engineering reviews that all of the systems are beyond their life expectancy, so any upgrades right now to try to use the spaces close to what they are and just kind of do the minimum amount of maintaining the system versus at the end of that 15 years going in there and basically doing a major renovation where you're taking out all of the systems and upgrading all of that, and then trying to compare that kind of cost to the cost of what would it be to do a new building. Generally, remodeling is less money than doing a new building, but there's quite a bit of square footage there. When might be the best time to start moving those functions around. I can certainly jump into the floor plans and go into as much detail as you want there. The big part of if you're moving out all of those social services and public health, if you're moving those out of family services in option number 1, you're obviously going to have a lot more available space in the building, so you'd be looking to expand some of those agencies that are in there, and also you'll have extra space available beyond that you'd have available for other renters. So that's another question of, is that something the county really wants to do, is start looking at finding available renters in the community and bringing them in. So this will give you an idea. These were all the existing facility drawings, so if you wanted, we put those in there so you have one report. So these were all color-coded. That lists the square footage, it lists the rent that you're collecting at family services. So that's really the family services and the courthouse, the way they exist today. And then we went through and started doing option number 1. We've got, and this is the new do more things at once building. We nicknamed it several different things, but you can kind of call it, but it's a larger building by about twice the size. So really the government services piece of it was just under $60,000. If you're taking the social services and public health, that was about $60,000. So this building gives you an idea of that. So this is showing, when you see the red boxes around this gives you an idea in the courthouse that we were expanding the county attorney in the lower level. We had future attorney space, so we were moving out those storage break areas and moving those with the new building. Other things we're relocating within the building. The first floor really remains as is, so you see a lot of existing. So there really was no work on this floor. On the second floor, you start to see the areas again that are surrounded by the red outline. So we're moving the public defender into the building, and then we had room for court administration to grow out in this area, and we had a little bit of extra space beyond what we were projecting for them. So they would be able to connect up to the courts. On the third level, what we were doing was putting a courtroom where the two meeting rooms are, and then a judicial chambers to the north. We had a second judicial chambers that could serve this room, converting back into a courtroom. And then we were adding conference rooms to support those, and that's how we were using this floor. So that'll give you an idea of the amount of renovation. Here, what we were looking at doing, when you start taking like legal services, that only applies if we were using site option A and going to the south. Then we were taking their block, so we did look at where they could fit into this building. So as we start clicking through, you start to see, can you go back one more, Ryan? As you start to see the doesn't want to go back?
Do the arrow.
How about the arrow?
Is this back?
No.
Other way, yeah. There you go.
There we go. Ahead too? One more? So what you start seeing is juveniles pretty set in their office space. So what we were trying to do is move out somebody that was adjacent so that they could expand into this. We have, when you start to see gray, that's an area I would tell you that I'm going to keep pointing out on here, that as these groups start expanding, we also still have gray areas here that are left as future rental. So these would be available that we didn't have an agency that wanted that space, so you could certainly rent that out. But you'll start to see on the upper levels, there's a lot more space just because we're moving out quite a bit with the social services and public health. The detox moved out into its own building. These agencies stayed the same. Probation expanded a little bit. You start to see that you've got half the space on the second level looking for a tenant. You get to the upper levels, workforce expands. Some of these other smaller agencies expand. But again, you're still seeing pockets of rental. And on the third floor, the fourth floor, half of this is available for rental. Again, we're vacating quite a bit of the building. And the fifth floor, the entire floor is available to look for a tenant. That's one of the biggest drawbacks of this option is we're not fully utilizing that space. So certainly when we get into the second option, we'll cover that, and more of this building is utilized at the front end of this. And then what you're doing is as those agencies are expanding, mostly the county agencies, then you start letting leases expire and having those people move out to create space for the county to grow into. So that's what you're starting to see. Some of these social services functions staying in place and expanding in place in a lot of this area. So you'll see, detox could stay or moves to a new building in a future space. So you're starting to see, public health is taking some space. These are existing. So you see a lot less available rental area. But to do this, we're also, when you look up in the notes, again, these are just several of the functions. When these groups may or may not want to move out, you certainly can prioritize that, or they can prioritize that. But right now, just in how we were doing it, we just said, we looked at some of the newest leases that come up the soonest. Workforce Center expires in 2020. They would leave to allow social services to expand. Lakes and Prairie lease expires also end of this year. They could go. Regional Extension expires next year, making their space available. So those were three of the functions that we thought we would need that amount of square footage to vacate the building to allow all of the other services to be able to expand and more fully utilize the building. So again, anything with that red outline, those were remodeled areas. So Nick and Ben will go into how they're calculating that. But certainly a lot less remodeling in this option. And again, they'll talk about that, but what's light, medium, and a heavy remodeling. So when you get on the light end of it, I think they'd say you get paint and carpet. You get to a medium, you start changing out a little bit of the lighting, diffusers, upgrading some of that. And then the major remodeling generally is gutting the space and upgrading that. And you certainly could start to do that at any time. The best way to do it would probably be floor by floor, rather than trying to do it wing by wing. That's the tough part about a building of this nature, is trying to be able to do a heavy remodeling in an occupied building. So this will give you an idea for the, is this option 1 or 2?
This is 2, this is the
This is
smaller
2.
building.
So this is a smaller building, so this will give you the idea of the functions that are moving from the courthouse to the new building. And then the only other function that comes with it would be the motor vehicle, the testing and public functions of that. So it gives you a little bit of an idea, again, of what's fitting in there, what we're projecting on each floor. If you look at the floor plans or the site options, you'll see that in option 1 and 2, they look almost the same size. Well, what we've done is in option 1, the building's footprint's a little bigger, and there's another story. So that's what's making up the size difference. But in the square footage, they're about one's twice as big as the other. So this gives you an idea of what we're looking at. The next one had what the detox layout would be. Again, when we were looking at it in pre-design, it was 2 levels. In this solution, it's 1 level, and it's 24 beds versus the 32 that it was previously when you saw it. If you have any questions in there, I want to keep repeating all of the same things. Okay, is that it?
That's it.
Okay, do you have any questions on the architectural piece that we can clarify before Nick and Ben get into more detailed pricing? Is it kind of clear on what we're proposing in each option?
Well, because I understand what the plan is, because I've been involved in the thing, but what we definitely haven't discussed yet is pricing, you know, and it's just, that's gonna make a big difference in
Okay.
where we're at, I think. Either full month, either half month.
Well, yeah, that's it's kind of like the first one here. Those guys have that. Yeah, it really is coming down to.
Is this one, what is this? Is this
It's
one
one,
set?
take one and hand it.
There's 2 pages or what?
1 page.
Oh, 1 page, okay.
If you keep 2, it's twice as much money, Kevin.
When I got a smaller version, if you want
Yeah,
a smaller number.
yeah, if you want the smaller numbers, yeah.
I noticed that this was real fine print.
But yes, you're right, Commissioner. When you start really looking at, option 1 is just building more things first in one building, where if you're starting to look at option 2, you can do more of a phased approach and try to more fully utilize your existing buildings and work your way into something long-term, rather than trying to tackle it all at once. Again, I think some of the lease expiring when we first started the study, it looked a little bleaker, that the building was really full at Family Services. But what happened over the period of the months of study, several different tenants were relocating out, so they were leaving Family Services, so that created some wings of the building that Social Services and Public Health could grow into. So I think that really alleviated or lessened their immediate needs, and it made it more of a down the road. I think most of their current needs are pretty close to being met, so that certainly helped that situation out. Otherwise, I think their needs would have risen to a little bit higher on the level. And again, you can do you can do them all at once and do them all in separate buildings. We just didn't want to put everything necessarily into giving you you know, everything at once and saying you had to do this all at once.
I think what you'll see here as you kind of look over this spreadsheet we have here, so the top half of the page, kind of the darker line you see in there is sort of your short term, and then as you go to the right side, sort of future phases, I guess, with splitting the buildings out. So what we've done is to basically itemize each building, each project, if you will, giving it the same name that Klein McCarthy here has. So like for the first item you see on the left-hand side, CSG-3, that's the larger government services building. If you go to option 2, CSG-4 is the smaller one, less square footage. So as you go between the two packets, you can kind of compare one to the other. So what we did was to basically take numbers from projects we've done for you on campus here, include an inflation factor from the year that we were calculating from. What we've done is just taken the industry average for the last 5 years has been 2.87%. So we've calculated that forward into where you see a year where we're projecting the work to start. So we're kind of assuming best case with the government services building, 2021, best case for a start. You'd have to get that going and bid out before you do the courthouse renovation, so you have spaces for that. So courthouse renovation and some of the remodeling of the family services building would then be into 2022. And then as you get into the right-hand side of the sheet here, we have other things like community services building. We show there at 2024, just not really knowing exactly when that would start, but just so you're aware of how much inflation we've figured on that. So what we've done is price our portion up for construction, and then below that, put in a multiplier for soft costs, which would cover your design fees, your soil borings, your furniture and fixtures, those types of things. Those can vary quite a bit, but so there's a range on each of the buildings for those, and then just kind of have a land acquisition line below that, which is included in the other package, I guess. It depends on which property we look at, of course, for that piece. So with the two different buildings, kind of just for one thing to be aware of, option 1, like Scott said, we got about 120,000 square feet for the CSG-3 building, and then option 2, I think we're closer to 60,000 square feet for the CSG-4. Then when you come down to the future phase for the new community services building, if you combine those two, and I have a note at the bottom, basically you have 11,000 square feet more of building that we're pricing. So by splitting that out, you have additional lobby space, mechanical spaces, common areas, things like that, that you wouldn't have just doing one building. So by doing them separate, there is additional square footage, additional cost we figured. So that's kind of the 30,000 foot look at it, I guess. I don't know. Steve? Yeah, and I think just to be clear, when we talk about options, I think, you know, the first 3 really kind of are almost an immediate type situation. We would be looking at whether it was C3 or C4. You would need to do that first, so we would be able to make the renovations for the additional court space that we know we need. And then some of the remodeling of the Family Service Center could go on during that process. But you know, the cafeteria options are really looking at what we want to do with detox. And I think one of the things that, you know, detox was really one of the biggest challenges of this discussion. And that's one of the breakouts there, again, in both areas, it's 6.3 million. But we also, in the event that we don't do anything, there's still a cost to the detox that needs, and that's in the bottom alternate there, the remodel of the existing detox. And again, that's looking to add the additional wing, but in the event that we don't do anything, that's about half of that cost. If we just remodel the existing detox and left it in place, it would be about $1.2 million. So, but I do think from the board's perspective, it's important to understand from a cafeteria standpoint, we're really, you know, the detox is a cafeteria piece, but the new administration building, the courthouse renovation, and then some remodeling at the Family Service Center would be kind of in that first phase.
For the remodeling in these numbers, this is generally, as Scott kind of described, a very light renovation. This isn't going and gutting to the walls. This is going in, upgrading some finishes, maybe moving a couple walls here and there, doors here and there. With that, you always have some minor mechanical light fixtures, sprinkler heads, things like that, but not major renovations, pretty much trying to use the spaces as they are.
And I know you touched, Scott, on kind of the 2035 number is, of the year is kind of what we're looking at the Family Service Center, needing basically a complete overhaul at that point. Could we touch a little bit on the costs of that today and then maybe what it would be in 2035?
Yeah, Scott, you had, I guess it's kind of the bottom of your column there, so with that, kind of same thing, we've used this inflation factor. We had a demolition contractor come over and assess the building and what it would take to actually demolish the whole thing. In today's dollars, you know, that's, you know, what it was, 2.7 million. So again, calculating that forward 15 years, that goes to be 4.1 million at that point. Same thing on a renovation. If we were to completely gut the interior mechanically, electrically, using today's numbers and those types of things. Also, at a building of that age, we'd have to look at the roof, probably most of your windows, probably a major tuck pointing and masonry upgrade at that point. We'd look at that to be close to 28 million, basically about $215 a square foot on a building that size. The multiplier just goes pretty fast. So again, you multiply that forward 15 years and it comes out at $44 million to do that renovation. So exponential growth on that. So is that kind of what you're looking for?
I did one of the things too that in working, talking with Lori, I think the big question, of course, for our board is, that's great, we have these needs, but how are we going to pay for it? And so one of the things that we asked Lori to do is talk with Ellers and just kind of get some projected bond projections. And so I have a handout for both. That would be the option 2 for the smaller, and option 3. When the request was made out, it was based on the construction costs and not necessarily the whole project cost. And so just to be clear with that, so we have a $30 million bond and a $50 million bond just for your interest. What's important to understand in looking at this is we're factoring in some of the sales tax projections that we're receiving on the corrections facility, that we have levy dollars that are being associated with that we would be looking to bring back. There are also in the bond, we're looking to transfer back under these documents, the $150,000 that we assigned to last year from the corrections facility to the budget. We would be now requesting that to be moved to the project. And also last year, as part of our budget planning, we did remove about $400,000 from the building fund. That would be taking into effect that we would be putting this back in next year's budget.
That's a $400,000 annual levy.
Yes, in the annual levy. And so what we have here in 4 columns, we have the projected sales tax collections based on 2%. We have the available levy dollars because of those additional funds. And then we have the bond of 30 and 50 million.
So I think when we started looking at this, Kevin and I were put on the financial thing again to look at this. So, and now that we're at that point, I think, we've got a lot to chew on here, and we're going to have to start looking at the possibilities. I mean, when I look at this, you look at option 1, you're looking at $60-70 million. I don't see that in the cards under any circumstances. And even, so we're looking at a less than 60,000 square foot building for that's over $300 a square foot just for basic office construction space.
So the way we calculated that was to basically take the law enforcement center price that we got bids in on, We backed up the garage portion of it, got to a square foot number on that, which surprisingly, that's already 2017 numbers, so we calculated that forward 4 years to 2021 to get to our square foot number on that. And then we did put in money for some contingencies on top of that, like a 10% contingency on top of that, so.
Yeah, but there's a lot of differences between like the law enforcement building and what this building would need to be in terms of, that's a hardened building over there, and, and it has labs and locker rooms and all kinds of things that, are not gonna be required in just a basic office building. I just looked because, I think I mentioned that to Steve, in the last few weeks, I happened to see in the forum, there was a West Fargo, somebody's building a 60,000 square foot office building with underground parking, and their price was about $9 million for that building, so, basically $150 a square foot for office space versus, over 300 for office space calculated here, so I don't know, it just seems steep.
That's just the basis we use. So,
Yeah,
I mean, just being here.
It's a rough start, so.
Yeah, I think the comparables between the buildings would be that we were programming in meeting rooms, similar to what the law enforcement has. You still have the break areas, the office areas, the lobby. You'd actually have more lobbies because you'd end up with some on each floor versus the way that building was laid out. Some of the things that are dissimilar to it would have been, yes, the evidence processing and the evidence storage, those kinds of functions.
How many square feet is that law enforcement center again?
We think it's just under 60,000. I don't recall the exact number.
But basically the same size.
Pretty close.
There are some other aspects to these facilities that would increase the price. Security is the #1 issue. There is added security that you wouldn't find in a regular office type building. There are some specialty spaces, medical spaces for WIC clinics, things like that, that also would be probably more expensive than regular office space.
So yeah, the LEC was 59,690 less the garage, that goes to 48.
Oh, that's
48,000 of office space. So that came out to $236 a square foot over there. Then we put a 10% design contingency on that, which you hope you don't need, but at this point, there's so many unknowns, we put that on. And then a 5% construction contingency on that. So that may be a little bit higher than what you need in the end. You're absolutely right, but that got us to $273 a square foot, then inflation 4 years forward. So that's where we got there.
Go for it, Ken.
I know you'll find this shocking that I might have a few questions. I just wanted, just on these pages here, just real briefly, would you, so the projected sales tax collections in that, in parentheses, 2%, that anticipated growth?
Yes, 2% growth.
So that's why we get up to,
Yes, yeah.
in the year, and that is all by a statute required to go towards the bond payment for the LEC and the correctional facility,
Correct.
right?
Correct.
So the next column over available, is that current money that could be shifted to this?
That's correct.
And does that incorporate in it reinstituting the 400,000 in that in this column?
No, the 400,000 would be done.
Would go over into the right column?
No, the additional money needed in the right column would assume that we've already added the 400 and the wind tax allocation.
So this would be in addition to those?
Correct.
Way over on the right?
That's correct.
Okay, and that's the same then on both of these?
Yes.
And is there any place in your study that talks about with each of these options what it does to the change in parking demands?
We did not. We assumed with the site purchases that would cover the building and the parking needed for it with those site options. And then Nick and Ben have site development costs in with the in their construction costs, so the site development, parking, that's all included in those numbers.
Yeah, so that's a good point to Commissioner Whalen's point. We use the number from the LEC, which has a parking lot out front and all the off-street parking, so on a square foot basis, we have that much more included in the number.
Originally, and this is, goes back quite a way in our planning, there was currently on the block that's straight west of the LEC, we currently have parking, and I think there's 3 houses that, is it 3 that are still there?
Yes, that's
And I
correct.
think there's some intention, I know there's some agreements in place with, I don't know if all of them or whatever, but was there ever an option that looked at putting the CGS 4, in option 2, on that property, and then subsequently finding a replacement for the lost parking that's there? So, is there ever, is there a plan that shows that, right there?
Yeah, that's the area that you're talking about.
Because
the three properties.
originally when we did this, when we acquired those 2 blocks, I think part of that, a consideration was that corner there could be reserved for a new facility that would meet the needs of administration. So is there any place where you?
This gives you an idea of the size of that. Certainly, we could look at, if that's a 2-story facility, if we put more stuff in the basement, we put more things to a 3rd story.
Every time we come to administration in this
fit.
building right now, we come up to the 3rd floor. Is there
Sure.
any reason why you couldn't do a
Nope.
3-story?
Nope, none at all. More of it was just everybody, the higher volume departments wanting to be on the 1st level. But you could certainly look at putting something like that. Size-wise, it fits across the entire north part here. We'd have to go back and look at the parking calculations, but we're expecting that you'd need some property to replace the parking plus the extra demand that you'd be creating.
Without question, but it seems to me when we're looking out at whatever the number of years it is to year 2035, with the needs of the Family Service Center being much greater, that it also is going to need a much greater parking, no matter what plan we have. And part of the reason why I'm asking these questions is recently we've been requested to enter into some discussions with the city of Moorhead on some sort of a joint facility, and with that, you can imagine what that in itself would do to what we're planning here and the additional parking that would raise. So all of these things, just for what we're trying to plan here, we need to have a good grasp for what our future needs are gonna be, which would include how much land we have to have for parking.
Well, I will also add that we did kind of calculate sort of expansion that's sort of planned into your current campus as it is. And this shows that with potential, there was future expansion of the jail, future expansion of the LEC, the juvenile center. And so our kind of thought was this parking here is sort of planned for those future expansions and the needs of your current campus as it is. So even if you did a building here, then you're kind of taking away your potential for future parking for those things that are also kind of in your long-range forecasted for expansion.
Yeah, I think as far as the Family Services Center, I don't think the parking need would go up unless we were adding physical space. We're really just putting different functions and different agencies or departments within that. So I don't think we would be, no matter who was in that building, I don't think we'd be increasing or lessening the demand for parking, which is one of the reasons why if you're going to the south, looking at putting something down on the south part, that does create more parking that can be overflow in the area versus what you'd be seeing if you were at the north end of the campus. But we did not go through and take all of the current campus, planning, all of the square footage and the parking, and run all of that analysis to get to where we were. Basically, we were saying the same way Ben was describing that size building, if you're putting it on this property, the parking for it would be associated with that property.
And that's included in the price.
Included in the price. And then if you're doing anything with Q-Tops, if you were doing the future community services, if you were doing that on that block, again, configuring it so that whatever you were doing would be fully contained on that block. So you'd be adding the parking there also.
Thank you. I have a lot of questions, but it's not going to happen today. And if I could, I am a guy even with bifocals. I'm sorry, but I can't read this. So I don't know, for me, if I can have a bigger version of this.
11 by 17, I think was.
Yeah, we can print.
You know what, when I leave here or sit here on my own to study this, the last thing I want to do is struggle to read it. And so I need to have something that I can get through. And so I would appreciate it.
Do you want us to send a larger
I'm
size?
sure I can.
Yeah, I think we could,
Okay.
we got lots of copy machines that could do this. And I do agree with Commissioner Whalen. I think, and I thank our committee for what you've done to this point. I know you guys have spent a lot of time in this. But I do think that there's a component in the building and there's a component of the finances. And I do want to state right now that we're putting this public and we're talking about expanding our footprint of our campus. And I think we need to be clear right now with all of our residents who might be watching that this is very preliminary in terms of what our needs are, but we do need to discuss our future needs. But like we did with the law enforcement center and the correctional facility, if and when that time comes into play where we're coming closer to a targeted plan, that there needs to be involvement with our neighbors and discussions before we make any commitment to anything. I just want to make that clear that to those watching that might be saying, oh, do I have to be bought out? There's still a lot of dialogue that's going to come into play. So,
Mr. Chair, Commissioners, if I could just make one last comment. Part of one of the things that we did address as a committee is to look at existing buildings in Moorhead that are vacant. And we did look at a series of different options in town. As a committee, we determined that we did not think that was the best interest to move off campus. But I do want the committee or this board to understand the committee did look at that with the understanding that you're looking at, you're about 75 to 80% of new construction is probably what you would be looking at to take an existing building and remodeling it to the needs that we would have. So.
When I look sometimes at when we did the Department of Corrections, they said each prisoner needs so much space and they need natural sunlight and all that stuff. But when we get to our own employees, we've got them in closets over there, and stuff like that. So what are we doing for our own employees? Who's going to tell us, or is anybody going to tell us we have to do something for our own employees? And I realize, yes, I don't have the answers either, but what are we doing for our own employees? And I think that's very important, that we come up with something.
Commissioner Gross, I think you're spot on that, but at the same point in time, there's nothing better than now to be thinking outside the box when it comes to bricks and mortar as well. When you take a look at what Microsoft does and what Blue Cross Blue Shield does, and a lot of these people do, is they're not necessarily centrally located into a building anymore. They might work maybe we need to look at who we can have on our staff be able to work from home. This is a new era, and now obviously with that needs to be an accountability component, as when you start getting into that. But I think those are things that still need to be researched. Could we cut a significant portion of our bricks and mortar space needs by allowing some of these people who probably don't spend a whole lot of time during their day in their office anyway, being able to do that outside. And
I guess what I was getting to, I thought you guys did a tremendous job on the department, in the correctional facility, I mean, and I think that's where we gotta get together again. We've gotta do a great job for our employees this time, you know, and that's where I'm coming from now. It's just, it's time to do something for them too, but yes, it's gonna cost some money. And that's my problem here. Where are we gonna get that from? You know, so, that's a big, and how much are we gonna, you know, are we gonna spend now, so. But, I think we do need to do something for our employees. Okay.
All right, thank you.
Thank you so much for giving us this information to work on.
thanks. See ya.
Okay, with that, we'll go into committee reports today. Kevin, will you start us out?
Yes, I will. Let's see. Last week, after a meeting, we did have a highway tracking committee meeting, and all of the items that we discussed at that, we did discuss here today, with the exception of we did meet on some issues regarding some land, potentially land use issues for the diversion authority that could impact some of the roads and stuff that's up in the northern area of the county. On Thursday, we had a Clay County Joint Powers meeting. We got an update from James on the juvenile center, which was great. We had some significant discussion regarding what we're looking for and changes in SCORE funding. And that was that. Yesterday morning, I attended the Diversion Authority's executive meeting. Several items were discussed there, and then in the afternoon, we had the juvenile center construction project meeting. And like I said, unfortunately, we originally were thinking that this was going to be ready by the middle of March. Now it's looking like it's going back another month because of some of these things that have to be prolonged just because they have to wait for some materials. That gets into the special orders on some things for that exhaust or whatever it is. Steve can maybe expand on that. But. And then last night I did attend the Buffalo Red River Watershed District meeting, and I gave a report on that. So that concludes my report.
Okay, Jim? Thank you. On Wednesday, I attended the City of Moorhead Planning Commission meeting, and there we had a discussion about changing regulating language regarding cul-de-sacs and bulbs in future development in the City of Moorhead, and the needs for the snow removal teams to be able to put the snow someplace in a specific situation. And there was some discussion of adding extra square footage or an extra lot for them to put the snow upon and things like that. And it's going to go back to the city staff. They're going to do some more adjusting that, and then we'll get back to the city council, I believe, as well. Then on Thursday, March 5th, I attended the Joint Powers meeting referenced by Commissioner Campbell. And then I went to the Clay County Local Advisory Committee for Children's Mental Health meeting. And Kids Fest is coming up April 18th at the Moorhead Center Mall. May 8th is Children's Mental Health Awareness Day. And we received agency reports. Among the reports that we received, mobile mental health crisis team remains very busy. And then later that afternoon, I attended the Clay County Collaborative Governance Board meeting, and there was quite an extended discussion about the efficacy of the truancy program that we're funding to about $100,000, and we're investigating whether that is cost effective or not, and other options that we have. That is my report.
Okay.
I just said last week, or this week, I had the construction meeting for the detention center, which we've discussed. And after that meeting, Kevin and I and Steve took a tour of the phase 2 of the jail project that's done now, and the kitchen and the laundry, and it's pretty impressive if you haven't gone through it. So that was it for me.
Okay, I too attended last week, Tuesday, the Highway Tracking Committee meeting. Also, what we discussed is they have to replace those salt tents out there. They look, I don't know what you really call them there. They look like tents out there anyway, but the Minnesota Department of Transportation would like to move that up a little bit, so we're looking into that project. Other than that, pretty much everything what's been covered already during our meeting. Wednesday, Jenny and I canvassed the ballots for last Tuesday election. And also, Thursday afternoon, I was at the meeting there with Mr. Haney, and yes, they did discuss that truancy program and whether it's a worthwhile project to keep throwing $100,000 into it. So those were my meetings. Steve?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Last Tuesday, again, I was at the highway tracking, which both yourself and Commissioner Campbell have addressed. On Wednesday, I met with Rhonda and some of our social services and talking about caseloads and social work safety. Later that day, I participated in the go-to meeting to look at this master plan and tweaks the presentation that was provided. And that afternoon, I also participated in a phone conference with John Shockley, Eric Dodson, and Jessica Warren with MCIT, continuing to work towards coverage for the MCC JPA. On the 5th, morning of the 5th, I participated in the Joint Powers meeting, which Commissioner Haney and Campbell have already addressed. We had county management that morning, where we talked about the master planning. We also talked about ensuring that our department heads are having, when they use a credit card, that they're not paying sales tax. So we went through protocol there. I participated in the Diversion Authority chair meeting that Commissioner Campbell has addressed, and the owners meeting. The owners meeting, it's a smoke and fire damper issue on the second floor, and there's 8 different areas that need to be looked at. The challenge is there's some cost to it, but the cost isn't as important as the time lag that it'll take to get the project done. One of the last portions of the project is putting the ceiling in place. Because this wasn't anticipated, these dampers are out about 2 weeks to get on board, and that's really kind of what's driving some of the cost, because we can't put the ceiling back in place without doing that work. And so just a note, we have our township officers meeting next Monday, 9 a.m. at Dilworth. We'll have a number of department heads out there sharing what's happening in their departments. And also, just a heads up, tomorrow we do have a drug court graduation, courtroom number 1 at 1:15. So, that concludes my report.
Okay, anything else, Colleen?
No.
We're adjourned.